Chapter 2066. Gunyanji put her hands to her mouth and rubbed them together. Are you cold? Hua Xiaoheng looked down at her. Why don't you go back to the plane? Gunyanji shook her head. No need. I want to see if I can help. She turned to ask Lu Jin, who was standing on her other side. Dad, you haven't told me yet. How do you know that the magnetic field energy didn't disappear naturally, but was artificially eliminated? You really touched a sore spot. Lu Jin glared at Gunyanji. Do you know how long it would take for the magnetic field energy to disappear naturally? If the residual energy disappeared naturally to a place where my instrument couldn't detect it, it would take at least 100 years if not 1,000. How could it disappear so quickly? Of course, it must have been eliminated by someone. Gunyanji understood. Just like the half-life of radioactive elements? It's not that powerful. Lu Jin lowered his head and fiddled with his small handheld instrument. But the principle is similar. In short, it suddenly disappeared. It must have been artificially eliminated. Gunyanji's eyes flashed and she muttered to herself. In terms of high-energy physics, he's almost the same as the Institute of High-Energy Physics. And he can use chaos mathematics? Isn't this person a genius? Genius? Lu Jin didn't want to admit it, but he had to respect reality. He snorted and said arrogantly, by your standards, of course he's a genius. What he meant was that by his standards, these people weren't geniuses. Gunyanji's lips twitched. She caught a glimpse of Hua Xiaoheng's serious expression from the corner of her eye, and her heart became even heavier. Song Jining was still in the hands of those people, and according to Lu Jin's analysis, the other party seemed to have some amazing genius. What should she do? Gunyanji thought about the 7 years she had spent on the internet in this world. Other than Gu Xiangguan, she hadn't heard of any other geniuses. However, Gu Xiangguan was already dead in this world. He was dead. She had seen his body with her own eyes. Thinking of Gu Xiangguan's body in this world, Gunyanji couldn't help but think of his wife who had died with him. She looked exactly like Qin Yaoguang after plastic surgery. And Qin Yaoguang had plastic surgery based on Qin Suwen's facial bones. Gunyanji glanced at Lu Jin and her eyebrows twitched. Hua Xiaoheng stood beside Gunyanji with his hands behind his back. He listened to her jesting with Lu Jin, but his mind was racing. He was thinking about how he could find Song Jining's whereabouts and rescue her without anyone noticing. They had never expected that there would be so many yachts here. The other party must have hidden Song Jining in one of these yachts. However, they couldn't figure out the other party's movements, so they didn't dare to let the other party discover that they had already caught up. Hua Xiaoheng's heart skipped a beat. He immediately sent a message to Hua Guanchen, telling him to not let the other party know when he brought reinforcements over. In other words, he couldn't let the planes and tanks make a big fuss. I have to come over quietly. When Hua Guanchen saw Hua Xiaoheng's message, he had just finished reorganizing the army. He sent the members of the Special Guard back to the military headquarters and replaced them with another group of Special Guard members. This time it was the 3rd Company of the Special Guard. The armed helicopters were ready and waiting for him to give the order. They were going to head southeast. Hua Guanchen expressionlessly looked at the phone that his personal secretary had given him for a while. He read the message from Hua Xiaoheng several times before giving the order in a low voice. Gather in a row of guards. Hua Guanchen's subordinate froze for a moment. Chief, the guards in a row are ordinary soldiers who are on guard duty. Do you want them to gather? They were now gathered in a row of the Special Guard. Hua Guanchen raised his hand. Yes, gather in a row of guards. Get on the helicopter and fly southwest. At the same time, the military vehicles on the ground will open the way. Make a big fuss. There must be an alarm, the kind that will disturb the people. The platoon commanders and company commanders. Chief, are we really going to disturb the people? Although military orders were obeyed, this order was against the tradition of the army. They didn't dare to obey it easily. Hua Guanchen nodded. Do as I say. If anything goes wrong, I'll take responsibility. Yes, Chief. The platoon commander of the guards no longer dared to question the chief's decision. He immediately transferred the soldiers onto the helicopter and sent some of the soldiers onto the military vehicles. They sounded the alarm along the way and sped southwest. The members of the 3rd Company of the Special Guard followed Hua Guanchen and secretly boarded a modified large truck. They took the drone and headed southeast. This move, which was a covert move, had successfully paralyzed the other party. When will the ship depart? Will it be too late? What if they catch up? Deputy Director Jiao was talking to someone on the phone in the cockpit. He was so nervous he was almost going crazy. It's okay. We have people watching the movements of the military closely. They're heading in the wrong direction. They're heading in the southwest direction. No one will come over. Deputy Director Jia quickly turned on his phone to look at the news. Sure enough, the internet was flooded with reports of military vehicles and armed helicopters suddenly gathering southwest at 10 o'clock in the middle of the night. He didn't know what had happened. There were also many passers-by taking pictures online to show that there were pictures. Deputy Director Jia finally breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the pictures. He had always felt that the enemy had caught up and suspected that they were not far away. It wasn't until he saw the news that he believed that he had finally gotten rid of the pursuers. It seemed that their people were quite good at misleading others. They had led the enemy to the southwest, and southeast. Although there was only a difference of one word in terms of direction, they were indeed two completely different paths. Deputy Director Jia's heart felt hot and cold. He couldn't help but take out a bottle of cold beer from the freezer in the cockpit and take a sip. As long as he successfully went out to sea this time, he wouldn't have to worry for the rest of his life. Lu Yuan stood by the beach for a long time before he finally had an idea. He turned back and met up with Hua Xiaoheng, Lu Jin and Gun Yanji. He said, "Get me a yacht. I want to compete with them." Hua Xiaoheng looked at him calmly and said, "It's easy to get a yacht, but how can we determine Miss Song's location? That's the most important thing." Lu Yuan clenched his fists. "Even if I have to search them one by one, I have to find her. Isn't that nonsense? If we can search them one by one, how can we not find them?" Lu Jin rolled his eyes again. "But can they let you search them one by one? Then what should we do?" Lu Yuan was so concerned that his mind was in a mess. He couldn't think of a suitable solution. Lu Jin had thought of a solution, but he could only rely on Hua Xiaoheng to complete it. He didn't have that much equipment and energy for the time being. Lu Jin looked at Hua Xiaoheng and said, "Xiaoheng, this is your mother's accident. Can you use your official position for personal gain?" Gun Yanji rubbed her forehead. It was clearly an open and above-board matter, so why did it sound so unreasonable when her father said it? She quickly stopped Lu Jin from continuing. "Dad, how is this using official position for personal gain? Ms. Song is the director of the Institute of High Energy Physics and the person in charge of the National Key Laboratory. If something happens to her, the country will definitely save her at all costs. Right, Major General Hua?" Hua Xiaoheng nodded. "Yes, as long as we can save people, as long as we can do it, there's no distinction between public and private." "Good." Lu Jin gave him a thumbs up and praised him with a smile. "That's how my son-in-law should be. He liked being flexible and unconstrained in doing things." Gun Yanji, Lu Yuan finally kicked him. "What are you waiting for? Tell me." Hua Xiaoheng blocked Lu Yuan's flying kick in time. Lu Jin dodged to the side and quickly said, "Let Xiaoheng use the weather weapon." Gun Yanji's eyes lit up. She clapped her hands together and said, "That's right. It would be best if the weather weapon could cause a storm on the sea. I dare say that most of the people on these yachts will choose to give up the race and disembark." Lu Yuan also understood and said calmly, "There's no need for them to give up. At that time, the government can step in and announce the rescheduling of the race with the excuse of a storm at sea, and the yachts are not allowed to go out to sea. Then, we can legitimately send people to help everyone evacuate." This is the first chapter for today. Chapter 2055, The Fisherman and the Fish 18. It's 2 o'clock today. At 8:30 p.m. the next night. Let me remind you about monthly votes and recommendation votes. Chapter 2067. Hua Xiaoheng was actually already considering this problem. "Uncle Lu's suggestion is very good. I'll ask my superiors for instructions. At the same time, you can also help us see if there are any improvements to our existing weather weapons." As he spoke, he used his Bluetooth headset to connect the phone and called General G. General G's personal secretary immediately went to General G's study after receiving the call. General G was still awake and waiting for news. His special guards had been mobilized, so the seriousness of the matter was self-evident. Seeing that it was Hua Xiaoheng's call, he immediately asked, "Have you found Director Song? Is Nianji okay?" Hua Xiaoheng faced the sea and said in a deep voice, "Nianji is fine, but Director Song's whereabouts are unknown. She's on the thousands of yachts across from me. I want to apply to the military to use the weather weapon." General G was a little troubled and said, "Xiaoheng, the procedures to activate the weather weapon are very cumbersome, and it's not during wartime when important military targets or leaders' lives are threatened. Xiaoheng, you know better than me that if it's not during wartime, activating the weather weapon does require a complete approval process. This is to prevent people from practicing fraud and endangering the lives of ordinary citizens. Moreover, our country's weather weapons are still immature. If we use them offshore, if we don't control the scale well, it will cause damage to the property of ordinary people. There is a certain risk. Xiaoheng, is there no other way? Do we have to use it? Can Director Song wait in time? General Ji asked a few questions in rapid succession, but Hua Xiaoheng was already prepared. He glanced at Lu Jin and said calmly, General Ji, it's precisely because our country's weather weapons are not mature enough that we need to test them in practice. There are 3 reasons why I'm applying to use the special clause to activate the weather weapon immediately. First, Director Song is an important scientist in our country and has made great contributions. The military use of high-energy physics that she has mastered has exceeded the importance of ordinary important military targets or leaders. When her life is threatened, it meets the special clause. Second, our opponent is related to the failure of the experiment 18 years ago. The failure of that experiment caused a heavy loss to the military and the country. Not only in terms of property but more importantly, in terms of talent. Our country's most famous high-energy physicist at that time, academician Song Haichuan, the director of the Institute of High-Energy Physics, was sacrificed at that time. At the same time, many outstanding young scientists of that time were sacrificed. It's not an exaggeration to say that their sacrifice caused our country's particle physics research to stagnate for 10 years. Such a huge loss, and now there are signs that it was deliberately done by foreign enemies. Can we just sit back and do nothing? Could it be that this level of threat cannot be considered as a declaration of war against our country? Thirdly, Professor Lu Jin, an important scientist who has just been introduced to our country, has suggested that he can help us test the scale and strength of the new weather weapon. With him in charge, I think you can rest assured. It will definitely not cause major damage to the lives and property of ordinary people. When General Ji heard the first 2 reasons, he already agreed. When he heard the third reason, he couldn't resist. He had only done 2 things in his life. One was to nurture talents for the military, and the other was to create more sophisticated weapons for the country. Talents and weapons were the true weapons of a great nation that could protect its homeland. Do you really have evidence to prove that the failed experiment between the military and the Institute of High-Energy Physics 18 years ago was sabotaged? General Ji became serious. If this accusation was true, then the investigation that year needed to be restarted. Even the investigators that year had to be re-examined. This was because the official results of the investigation that year ruled out the possibility that the failure of the experiment was sabotaged by humans. Hua Xiaoheng didn't know much about what happened that year, but his father, Hua Guanchen, had revealed some information to him this time. Then, in the process of pursuing the enemy, the bomb they used was exposed. It could be said that it was a classic example of not courting death. Hua Xiaoheng also had doubts in his heart. He said calmly, it's too early to conclude that there was a problem with the investigation that year. And if it was indeed sabotaged, why did they jump out and expose their shortcomings after so many years? These are all problems. But for now, General Ji, please immediately agree to Professor Lu personally presiding over the weather weapon to rescue Director Song. General Ji thought about it and felt that what Hua Xiaoheng said made sense. He immediately said, okay. I agree to your request. It's a special case. Immediately report the 3 reasons you just mentioned in writing to me. I will immediately approve it. You let Professor Lu preside over the operation of the weather weapon. Yes, Chief. No matter how calm Hua Xiaoheng was, he was still a little happy. He knew that Song Jining would definitely be saved this time. After hanging up the phone, Hua Xiaoheng looked at Lu Jin and Lu Yuan and said seriously, I've already applied to use the weather weapon. General Ji has agreed, but we need Uncle Lu to personally preside over the operation and evaluate and improve our existing weather weapon. Only then will General Ji have more reason to explain to the people in the military. The military headquarters implemented a collective leadership system. Although General Ji was the head of the Supreme Council, he couldn't cover the truth with one hand. Lu Yuan immediately said to Lu Jin, please help us. He was worried that Lu Jin would suddenly act up and make a fuss. Lu Jin snorted. In your eyes, am I such an unreasonable person? Hua Xiaoheng, Lu Yuan, and Gu Nianji didn't say anything, but their eyes said the same thing. You are, childish. Lu Jin was disdainful, but he also knew that he had been too willful and rash in the past. It was normal for these people to have doubts about him. However, he was a patient with severe interpersonal disorder, and he wasn't a useless person. He patted Lu Yuan on the shoulder and said provocatively, Boss Lu, if it weren't for the fact that your cooking is so delicious, I would have snatched Director Song over. I've only admired 2 women in my life. One is Nianji's biological mother. She's no longer around, and the other is Director Song. If I make a move, do you think you and Director Song have any hope? He snorted coldly and left with a flick of his sleeves. Gu Nianji was dumbfounded. She stomped her feet and quickly chased after him in an attempt to change the topic. She deliberately said coquettishly, "Dad. Where do you put me then? What happened to me being your favorite girl?" Lu Jin turned to look at her, took her hand and scratched her straight nose. He deliberately scolded her with a straight face. "What nonsense are you talking about? You're my girl, so of course you're number 1 in my heart. How can you be compared to the woman I admire? To them, I might have feelings for a man and a woman, but to you, I only have feelings for a father and a daughter. How can they be compared? It's just like how some women are brainless and insist on comparing themselves to their daughter-in-law. What do you mean by getting married and forgetting your mother? How brainless. If your son's feelings for his daughter-in-law are the same as his feelings for his mother, then it's disgusting. Let me tell you." The corners of Gu Nianji's mouth twitched from the reprimand, but she calmed down as she held Lu Jin's broad and warm palm. Just as she was about to continue persuading him, she didn't expect Lu Yuan to follow her. Without hesitation he said to Lu Jin, "As long as you can save Director Song, I'll quit immediately and fulfill your wish. As long as she can come back safely, I'll leave this place immediately and never see her again." This was today's second update, Chapter 2056, The Fisherman and the Fish, 19. There were 2 updates today. Remind me of the monthly votes and recommendation votes. Chapter 2068. Lu Jin was so shocked by Lu Yuan's words that he stumbled and almost fell to the ground. Gu Nianji quickly supported him. She was also shocked by Lu Yuan's words. She turned to look at Lu Yuan. Everything was dark in the dark night sky, but under the hazy moonlight under the navy blue sky by the sea, she could see Lu Yuan's slightly red eyes. She didn't know that a man who almost never showed his true emotions on his face would have such a painful and enduring expression. This expression was too infectious. In that instant, Gu Nianji seemed to have seen this man's entire life. In his entire life he had hidden all his personal emotions, love and pain, joy and anger, regret and hatred deep in his heart. What appeared in front of everyone had always been peace, cheerfulness, and perseverance and faith that he would not be discouraged no matter what desperate situation he was in. It was also because of this that when she unintentionally sensed this man's emotions, Gu Nianji knew that this man had reached his limit. He couldn't continue to be reserved and he couldn't continue to be calm. He was like a volcano that was burning inside. Although the magma hadn't erupted yet, the surface of the ground had already begun to loosen. Not only was Gu Nianji shocked by his expression, but even Lu Jin, who liked to joke at the most inopportune times, froze. After a long while, he pointed at Lu Yuan's nose and said, "Are you stupid? Can't you tell if what I said just now was true or not? Would I like another woman? Do you think your Director Song is a treasure that everyone wants?" Lu Yuan closed his eyes. "No matter what you say, as long as you save her." Lu Jin was so angry that his nose was crooked. "Boss Lu, you're trying to anger me to death. Not only are you trying to anger me to death, but you're also trying to anger me to death so that I won't have the face to see Nianji's mother. There's no one else in my heart. There's never been anyone else. Boss Lu, you like Miss Song so much that you can't even push her away. No wonder Miss Song didn't like you back then. You deserve it." Gu Nianji closed her eyes and screamed, "Dad! Stop talking. Let's go take charge of the weather weapon. I'll go with you." Xiaoheng walked over and grabbed Gu Nianji's hand. He said calmly, "Let Uncle Lu go back with my men. You stay with me and don't go anywhere." Gu Nianji, on the other end of the Bluetooth headset, Yin Shixiang and Zhao Liangzi were on standby in the central control room. Hearing Xiaoheng's words and the argument between Lu Yuan and Lu Jin, both of them were very emotional. Yin Shixiang shook his head and turned off his headset. He laughed strangely and said to Zhao Liangzi, "Even Xiao has a day when he's so clingy. Actually, it's pretty good for Nianji to follow Professor Lu back to the military headquarters. It's safer than staying at the beach." Zhao Liangzi understood Xiaoheng's actions. He looked down at the screen in front of him and said dryly, "You haven't lost the person you love the most, so you don't understand Xiao's mentality." After a pause, he said very quietly, "But I understand. If Bai Shuang hadn't died, he would have been the same as Xiaoheng. At any uncertain moment, he would have wanted her to be with him. Even if he had to tie her to his side with a rope, he would have done it." Yin Shixiang's heart skipped a beat. He knew that he had stepped on Zhao Liang's sore spot and felt very guilty. He immediately turned on his headset and pretended to be working hard. He said loudly to Hua Xiaoheng on the other end of the headset, "Hua Xiao, I'll go to the airport to pick up Professor Lu right away and send him to the military headquarters." Hua Xiaoheng held Gu Nianji's hand tightly and said, "I was just about to look for you. Go to the airport to pick him up immediately, then personally send Professor Lu to the military headquarters and bring him back personally. No matter where Professor Lu goes, you have to follow him closely. You can't miss anything. I won't take any chances." "Yes, Chief." Yin Shixiang quickly stood up and saluted. Even though Hua Xiaoheng wasn't by his side when he gave orders in a deep voice, there was always an indescribable pressure. Even across mountains and rivers, people couldn't help but obey. Lu Yuan looked at Lu Jin anxiously and said sincerely again, "Please." Lu Jin sighed and patted Lu Yuan on the shoulder. "You win. Boss Lu, promise me one thing and I'll go save Director Song." "Say it. No matter what it is, I'll agree." Lu Yuan let go of all his caution and slyness. "If I can't do it, I'll give my life to you." The corners of Lu Jin's mouth twitched. "Boss Lu, why would I want your life? I want you to promise me that when Miss Song is rescued, as long as you propose to her, I'll preside over the weather weapon." "Lu Yuan, do you agree or not? If you don't agree, then forget it. She has nothing to do with you anyway, so why should I save her?" Lu Jin simply crossed his arms and looked up at the starry sky. Lu Yuan understood what Lu Jin meant. He was both touched and nervous. He nodded cautiously again. "I promise you, as long as she returns safely this time, I'll definitely propose immediately." "That's more like it. Remember it well." Lu Jin suddenly flashed his phone and waved it at Lu Yuan. "I recorded everything you said today. When the time comes, whoever dares to snatch Miss Song from you, I'll release it and embarrass him to death. I'll make him back off." "Lu Yuan." Gu Nianji helplessly buried her head in Hua Xiaoheng's arms. "Who was going to be embarrassed to death?" Hua Xiaoheng waved at Lu Jin and motioned for him to hurry to the helicopter. Not long after, the helicopter took off. Hua Xiaoheng's soldiers included a helicopter pilot. He and 2 other soldiers escorted Lu Jin back to the military headquarters in the imperial capital. At the temporary airport at the military headquarters, Yin Shixiang was waiting for him with the field personnel of the Special Operations Forces. As soon as Lu Jin got off the plane, Yin Shixiang immediately reported to Hua Xiaoheng. "Target A has reached its destination. End of report." Hua Xiaoheng, Gu Nianji, and Lu Jin had already brought the rest of the soldiers to a place where they could see the coastline. The place was brightly lit, and more than 1,000 yachts were lined up in a row at the port. The yachts were all decorated with Christmas lights. The lights were shining and there were many people getting on and off. The entire dock was even more lively than during the day. They quietly arrived here and didn't attract any attention at all. However, they didn't blend into the crowd at the dock. Instead, they found an open and leeward place to hide. They waited for the wind to blow and for reinforcements to arrive. At that moment, Hua Guanshan's 3rd company of the Special Guards had arrived not far from here in a modified truck. Lu Jin got off the helicopter and was taken into a bulletproof car by Yin Shixiang. They drove towards the center of the military headquarters. The windows of the car were very dark, and Lu Jin couldn't see the road outside. Only the driver in the front row could control the direction through his special eyes. Lu Jin only knew that the car made many turns and finally drove deeper and deeper underground. After the car stopped, he got out of the car and saw that he was indeed standing in front of an underground building that looked like a bomb shelter. The door was as tall as 2 people and extremely heavy. It was wrapped in a thick layer of cowhide and there were all kinds of defensive materials inside. Even a hydrogen bomb would find it difficult to blow it up, let alone a normal nuclear bomb. This was probably the most important wartime military command base in the entire Huaxia Empire. Lu Jin's expression was a little strange. He had seen the same place in the other world, but that was before he had fallen out with He Qingjian. He Qingjian had taken him there to see it, and at the same time he had asked him to help test their weather weapon. Standing in front of almost the same place, Lu Jin couldn't help but ask Yin Shixiang, "Who built this place?" Yin Shixiang whispered, "It said that this was one of the military projects that the military worked with the Institute of High Energy Physics back then." Lu Jin suddenly understood. It seemed that the failed experiment 18 years ago wasn't the only project that the military had worked with the Institute of High Energy Physics. The gate of the base quietly opened and Yin Shixiang and Lu Jin walked in together. The other members of the Special Operations Forces didn't have the authority to enter, so they could only stand guard outside the door. After entering, Lu Jin was directly brought to a black oak door by the staff here. On the door there were two protruding English words stamped in gold: weather. Warfare. This was the most mysterious weather weapon control room in any country. This was the first update of the day, Chapter 2057, The Fisherman and the Fish 20. It was the third watch today. The second watch was 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and the third watch was 8:30 in the evening. They were all big chapters with rewards and updates. Because they owed too much, they could only pay it back with big chapters. Remind me of the monthly votes and recommendation votes? Chapter 2069. Yin Shixiang followed behind Lu Jin and walked in. The black oak door behind them immediately closed, separating the inside and outside of the room into two different worlds. Yin Shixiang could be considered someone who had seen the world. The central control room at the headquarters of the Special Operations Forces was also one of the most confidential places in the Empire's military, but compared to this place, it seemed to be lacking something. This should be a hall, but at first glance it looked like a library. There were many bookshelves densely packed together. However, what was on the bookshelves were not books, but computer mainframes. Perhaps they weren't mainframes, but computer mainframes. Yin Shixiang wasn't sure what these things were called. It was as if he had walked into the basement of a supercomputer center and was surrounded by computers everywhere. The staff in this room were all wearing white coats and looked no different from scientists in ordinary laboratories. However, Yin Shixiang knew that these people were not only professional, but also had a strong background. They had all gone through the most stringent background checks and were the military's best reserves of talent. They all looked at Lu Jin eagerly, like fanatical fans meeting their own celebrities. They couldn't wait to worship him like a god. Lu Jin was quite polite to them. As he walked, his gaze casually swept around the hall. He nodded at the staff and said, "Is the weather weapon control room here?" "Yes, Professor Lu. All the control systems related to the weather weapon are in this laboratory." A man in his 30s looked at Lu Jin excitedly. "The organization has asked you to preside over this weather weapon experiment. All the personnel in the military's weather control laboratory have been ordered to assist." Lu Jin smiled slightly and raised his hand. "Cut the crap. Give me the password to the console. Use the same number of people as usual. Listen to my instructions." "Yes, Professor Lu." The man stood at attention and saluted happily, treating him like a chief. The corners of Yin Shixiang's mouth twitched. He thought to himself that Nianji's father was actually quite reliable. Lu Jin seemed to have heard his thoughts. He turned around and glanced at him, then said seriously, "Stand behind me. Don't make a sound and affect everyone's operations." Yin Shixiang immediately shut his mouth like a clamshell. After bypassing the rows of bookshelf-like buildings, the view before them suddenly became clear. In front of them were rows of long desks, and the desks were also filled with computer screens. The surrounding walls, the ceiling, and even the floor beneath his feet were all OLED displays. When the lights dimmed, it was as if they were in the depths of the vast starry sky, surrounded by blue light. Yin Shixiang suddenly felt a sense of awe. Lu Jin said with a sigh, "Weather weapon." From the name, you can tell that it's man-made manipulation of the weather for military purposes. Actually, we have long been able to control the weather in a small area. The most common methods are sprinkling dry ice and rain, artificially dispersing clouds and fog, and even controlling lightning. There's also a thermobaric bomb that can be used in actual combat. It uses high temperature and high pressure to quickly consume the oxygen around a semi-enclosed target. It's especially useful for attacking targets in caves or tunnels. In addition, there are also cold weapons and high-temperature weapons that use the weather to attack the enemy. As Lu Jin spoke, he used the highest password that the other party had given him to turn on the central computer mainframe of the console. At the same time, he began to teach the staff, who were all ears. However, these weather weapons that are used in actual combat all have a characteristic, which is that their usable range is very small. Why? Because our grasp of weather weapons isn't precise and thorough enough. Just like many years ago when nuclear weapons made a theoretical breakthrough, everyone knew that they could create nuclear bombs this way. However, before a nuclear bomb with a controllable explosive yield was created, no one dared to use a nuclear bomb. Because you don't know how much damage the nuclear bomb you throw will cause. If the damage is uncontrollable, it's a double-edged sword. It hurts both others and oneself. Such a weapon can only survive in the laboratory and can't be used on the real battlefield. The same is true for weather weapons. The current weather weapons are powerful, but if we can't control their attack range, they can cause an earth-shattering disaster. Nuclear bombs and hydrogen bombs are not worth mentioning in front of real weather weapons. The laboratory staff were busy operating the equipment while listening attentively to Lu Jin. They wished they could be more careful and multitask. Lu Jin turned on the computer mainframe in front of him and selected the Hurricane at Sea file on the menu. At this moment, the OLED screens in the room immediately changed patterns, showing thick, undulating clouds that were as thick as cotton candy. Yin Shixiang immediately felt the power of nature. Lu Jin's hand paused for a moment before he continued. Someone once said that the biggest hurricane the United States experienced a few years ago, Katrina, was caused by a weather weapon developed by Russia. Although Russia strongly opposes it, this statement isn't groundless. I can be sure that all countries in the world, as long as they have a certain amount of talent and economic strength, are researching weather weapons. It's just that the development of this weapon is more difficult than nuclear and hydrogen bombs. Because if you're not careful, it's very likely that you'll wipe your own country off the face of the blue planet first. So there are no more than 3 countries on the entire blue planet that are really developing weather weapons. When Lu Jin said 3, Yin Shixiang wanted to laugh. Other than Wuxia, the United States, and Russia, why don't you find a 4th country that can develop weather weapons? I'll admit defeat if I can't find it. The laboratory staff couldn't help but curl their lips. They were more reserved and didn't laugh out loud. Lu Jin shrugged. He didn't think what he said was funny. It was all the truth. His hands began to quickly type out a series of instructions on the keyboard. Setting the Hurricane on the sea. Enter the coordinates of the coast. Within 5 nautical miles. Hurricane level 3. Because Hua Xiaoheng's goal was only to find a legitimate reason to stop the 1,000-yacht race that had started at midnight tonight, he didn't want to cause too much trouble at sea, so a Hurricane level 3 was enough. The laboratory staff put on their headphones and clearly listened to Lu Jin's instructions in English. The most difficult thing about weather weapons was controlling their scale and intensity. They had simulated it many times on the computer, but they still couldn't figure out what would happen in reality. Because the weather and environment in reality were very different, any small change would cause a butterfly effect, making their control formula unsuitable. If the control formula failed, it would be equivalent to the weather weapon failing. An uncontrolled weather weapon would attack indiscriminately. No one would be stupid enough to kill themselves when they killed the enemy. The control formula code that Lu Jin had written using chaos mathematics was irreplaceable in correcting errors in time. Lu Jin entered the formula into the control system. After doing the calculations a few times, he had a plan. Atmosphere 1 activate. Atmosphere 2 activate. Atmosphere 3 activate. Lu Jin didn't stop reporting until Atmosphere 180 was activated. The code names that he mentioned were actually the tall windmills that had been erected on the seaside and hillsides around the imperial capital over the years. These tall windmills, which were made of white concrete and special alloys, could be used to generate wind power on the surface. At the same time, they could be used for military purposes. These tall windmills were actually antennas that were mainly used to transmit high-frequency electromagnetic waves. They could emit short-wave electromagnetic waves into the atmosphere and use atmospheric particles to focus and charge them. This would change the temperature and density of the atmosphere above the blue planet and create the eye of the hurricane. Lu Jin's instructions were to activate the antenna function of these tall windmills and begin to release a huge short-wave electromagnetic wave to the corresponding coordinates above the blue planet. Gu Nianji, Hua Xiaoheng, Lu Yuan, and the others hid behind a shelter from the wind and quietly waited for the hurricane to arrive. Not long after, Hua Guanchen arrived with the modified truck. He spoke to Hua Xiaoheng on the phone, and under his guidance he parked the truck some distance away from the dock. The modified truck's engine was almost completely silent. It didn't alert anyone along the way. At least everything was normal on the yacht at the dock, and there were no special movements. Hua Guanchen walked over quietly with the members of the 3rd Company of the Special Guards. He frowned and asked, "Why are you still waiting? Why aren't you making a move? How long are you going to wait? Director Song, don't hold him hostage for too long." Hua Xiaoheng looked at his watch and felt a sudden whirlwind. He looked up and narrowed his eyes. He said, "Soon." As soon as he finished speaking, the whirlwind suddenly grew stronger. It was so strong that people couldn't help but spin in place. Gu Nianji was the lightest there and she was almost blown away. Hua Xiaoheng hugged her and looked up at Hua Guanchen. "General Hua, I'll have to trouble the comrades of the Special Guards to put on the local garrison uniforms and board the yacht to help evacuate the crowd." Hua Guanchen. "Why do we have to evacuate the crowd?" He was a little confused, but looking at Hua Xiaoheng's confident expression and Lu Yuan standing beside him with his hands behind his back, It seemed like they had made some kind of deal in private. Huo Guanchen looked away unhappily. He was about to continue asking questions when the whirlwind grew stronger and stronger. Especially at the dock, which was the center of the whirlwind, it was visibly boiling. The sparkling seawater began to churn. Wave after wave, from small to large, rolled up huge waves that washed over the yacht moored by the dock. What happened? The weather forecast didn't say that it would be windy tonight? The people on the yacht got out, wearing raincoats. They put their hands on their foreheads and looked up at the sky. The originally clear navy blue night sky was now covered in thick clouds that pressed low above their heads. The cyclone almost scraped their faces and it was bone-chilling. Everyone shivered and went back into the cabin, closing the doors and windows tightly. But this was far from enough. The quiet bay seemed to have been violently awakened. It rolled and flopped to vent its anger. Whoosh! A high wall of seawater rolled up and slammed into the yacht closest to the side. The yacht was originally parked in a slightly off position, and it was smaller than the other yachts. Immediately, half of its body was tilted by the waves. Water. It's flooded. The yacht is flooded. 3 men wearing orange life jackets on the yacht ran out in panic. They jumped into the sea and quickly swam to the shore. But when they reached the sea, they realized that the waves were bigger than they looked. The tumbling whirlpool on the sea almost squeezed their internal organs out. A few members of the Sea Guards jumped down from somewhere and dragged the 3 of them ashore. After they got ashore, heavy rain fell from the sky. This time the rain was a little strange. It was not like the usual rain, which started with small raindrops and then turned into a downpour. This time it started with a rainstorm. It was as if the sky had been smashed by a waterfall. The rain poured down heavy and urgent. The wind howled, the rain was heavy, and the seawater was rolling. When the sky was angry, it was really chilling. Many people hid in the yacht to check the weather on their phones. It turned out that there had suddenly been a hurricane in this area of the sea. It was said that the cold current from Siberia had merged with the tropical clouds from the south and north. The cold and heat collided, causing the hurricane on the sea. Immediately after, the local government began to issue an emergency notice, asking everyone in the hurricane area to evacuate. Because it was said that the hurricane this time would last for a longer time, and the intensity would increase. For the sake of the people's lives, the local government decided to send out military soldiers for disaster relief. Huo Guanchen finally understood Huo Xiaoheng's intentions. He smiled slightly and the deep wrinkles at the corners of his eyes curved. They were strangely similar to Lu Yuan's. General Hua, it's your turn now. Huo Xiaoheng had been wearing a Bluetooth headset to keep in touch with Zhao Liangzi. He and Gu Nianji were both wearing raincoats and stood by the side of the truck to take shelter from the rain. Huo Guanchen nodded. I'll bring the soldiers of the 3rd Company of the Special Guards with me. Lu Yuan immediately said, I'll go too. Huo Guanchen glanced at him. He wanted to refuse, but Huo Xiaoheng said, President Lu knows the situation over there better. He's seen the kidnappers with his own eyes. Huo Guanchen pursed his lips. Then let's go together. In the storm, a neat group of people trotted to the dock. A soldier in a black raincoat and holding a yellow megaphone shouted at the yachts, Ladies and gentlemen, please disembark immediately. Please disembark immediately. Level 3 hurricane warning. It's very likely to be upgraded to level 4. For the sake of your safety, please disembark immediately. Our troops will send you back to the city in a military vehicle. He stood at the top of the dock and repeatedly used the yellow megaphone to shout loudly in the wind and rain. Huo Guanchen quickly boarded the yachts with the members of the 3rd Company of the Special Guards. As they evacuated the crowd, they searched for traces of Song Jining. Deputy Director Jia had been restless since the wind and rain started to blow on the sea. They were only an hour away from setting off, but suddenly, something went wrong. He picked up his phone and contacted his own people. He asked angrily, What's going on? Why did a hurricane suddenly blow? When you arranged the time, didn't you look at the weather in advance? The other party was also very aggrieved and said unhappily, This plan was set half a year ago. Those weather forecasters sometimes can't even predict the weather the next day. Who can guarantee that the weather forecast half a year ago will be accurate? This was the second major chapter of today's update, Chapter 2058, The Great Country's Important Weapon. P.S. 100,000 Qidian coins as a reward to the president of Wu AI Hall, in September have been delivered with 2 updates. It was the 3rd night today. 8:30 p.m. of the 3rd night. They were all major chapters of rewards and updates. A reminder for monthly votes and recommendation votes. Chapter 2070. Deputy Director Jia was speechless. He also knew that the weather out at sea was highly unstable. The weather forecast was indeed not that accurate. Not to mention the weather forecast half a year ago, even the forecast yesterday might not be 100% accurate. However, he was flustered and would not feel comfortable if he did not scold others. After yelling at the person on the phone for a while, he said angrily, "Then what should we do? If not today, when will we leave?" The other party could not make up his mind and said, "I will ask the higher-ups again. Wait for a while." After hanging up the phone, Deputy Director Jia looked out the window. The wind on the sea was getting stronger. Raindrops the size of fists were smashing against the hull of the yacht, as if they were trying to drill a hole in the boat. Deputy Director Jia moved to the window, picked up the infrared night vision binoculars and looked down. He saw that there were indeed many people coming from the shore to help evacuate the yacht. The people on the yacht also got off the yacht. He also heard the people on the yacht come out and say that the competition tonight was cancelled. They would have to wait for further notice when they would gather again. After talking to Deputy Director Jia, the person on the other side quickly reported to the higher-ups. Their team looked loose on the outside, but in fact they were tight on the inside. Most of the time they only communicated one way. It was not that easy for him to find the higher-ups. Fortunately, the person above him also realized that the situation had changed. Not long after, he took the initiative to contact him. "What's going on? Why is there suddenly a hurricane at the port? Didn't we check the weather forecast?" The person quickly said, "Yes, but it was half a year ago. At that time, I reminded you that the weather forecast is not that accurate. How can you believe a forecast from half a year ago?" The other party actually scolded him. "What do you know? Normal weather forecasts are not accurate, but our forecast is not accurate." The person was scolded until he was speechless. He only glanced at the satellite image on the TV. How could the gathering clouds be accurate? However, he only dared to mutter in his heart. He did not dare to say it out loud. After the person above him finished speaking, he did not speak for a long time. It was unknown if he was thinking of a solution or talking to someone else. However, when the person above him spoke again, his voice changed. There was a hint of fear in it. "The yacht competition is cancelled, but tell Deputy Director Jia to leave quickly. That's not a sudden change in the weather. It's Wuxia using their weather weapons." Weather weapon. The man's heart trembled and his whole body trembled. Really? You're so powerful, can you escape? What's the use of asking me? Hurry up and let him go. Don't wait. They were coming for him. But don't worry, the weather weapon is not so easy to control, so the boss's analysis is that it will only be near the sea. If it goes further, it should not be so powerful. I didn't expect that the director of the Institute of High Energy Physics could make Wuxia want him to stay at all costs. The person above him had a ferocious look on his face. "Boss, you're the best. You've chosen a good target." After hanging up, the man immediately called Deputy Director Jia and said anxiously, "You better leave. This was not an ordinary hurricane but a weather weapon. The warship is still in international waters. Don't disembark. Leave now while they don't dare to act rashly." Deputy Director Jia immediately understood. He was angry, afraid, and terrified. Raising his head to look at the dark sky above his head and the low pressure of the thick clouds, he felt as small as a flying insect on a spider's web, stuck in the spider's web and unable to move. Such a big deal. Is to prevent me from going out to sea. Deputy Director Jia quickly made a decision and said in a deep voice, "Since they did this, they probably didn't dare to let me know their real purpose. So even if I leave immediately, they won't dare to do anything to me. As long as they didn't kill him, he had nothing to be afraid of. That's for sure. Otherwise, why would they use the weather weapon? Can't they just search the yacht? It seems that they really value Director Song. You have to remember to send her to the warship in one piece. A powerful scientist could be equivalent to an entire division. This was a common understanding. And the most powerful scientist could even be equivalent to an army. This was what Huo Guanchen was thinking at this time. He was wearing the military uniform of the local garrison and led the 3rd Company of the Special Guards to help evacuate the crowd on thousands of yachts. He was also nervously searching for traces of Song Jining. 1 ship, 2 ships, 34 ships, 58 ships, 226 ships. As he searched by himself, he listened to his subordinates' reports. His heart was burning with anxiety. Where were they hiding Song Jining? Lu Yuan also followed them onto the boat and searched the yachts one by one. At this moment, a yacht suddenly started its engine regardless of the wind, rain, and waves. It broke through the turbulent water in front of it and rushed out like an arrow leaving the bow. Lu Yuan's mind raced and he quickly realized that Song Jining must be on that yacht. At this moment, he had just helped 2 members of the 3rd Company of the Special Guards evacuate the people on a yacht. He was originally the last to leave, but seeing that the situation had changed, he immediately returned to the cabin. Without another word, he found the spare key and started the yacht. An ordinary soldier might not know how to drive a yacht, but Lu Yuan was the CEO of a listed company in the other world. He was very proficient in this kind of rich people stuff. Huo Guanchen noticed the unusual movement here and understood after pondering for a moment. His face was livid and he shouted at the stormy sea, "Come back!" His assistant checked along the way and quickly confirmed the registration information of the 2 yachts that had left. He said to Huo Guanchen, "Chief, the first yacht belongs to a home improvement company, and the second one belongs to a logistics company. However, the owner of the second yacht just called the police, saying that someone stole their yacht and went out to sea." Huo Guanchen gritted his teeth and said angrily, "Where's our boat? Go out to sea and chase after them." Under the attack of the weather weapon, they still dared to sail out to sea. It seemed that not only had the other party figured out the truth of the sudden hurricane this time, but they were also fearless. They were certain that they couldn't directly control the weather weapon to make them suffer. Huo Xiaoheng held his binoculars and looked out at the stormy sea. He also saw the 2 yachts suddenly sail out one after another. Huo Guanchen's request for the military to send out military ships to chase after them was sent to Huo Xiaoheng. He calmly expressed his objection. No, sending out military ships to chase after them will confirm the other party's guess. They don't have evidence to prove that the hurricane this time was caused by the weather weapon. It's just a guess. We can't give the other party an opportunity. Huo Guanchen almost stomped his feet when he found out. So what if it's true? We're not afraid of them. Chief, General Ji said that weather weapons are internationally known as weapons of mass destruction and are prohibited by many international conventions. Although we haven't joined any international conventions that restrict the use of weather weapons, we still have to show compliance on the surface. If we fall out now, we can't maintain a tacit understanding. It will make the country very passive internationally. Huo Guanchen was so angry that he threw away the Bluetooth headset and shouted, "I don't want to listen to this nonsense. If they don't send a warship, I'll do it myself." As he spoke, he rushed to one of the yachts and started sailing. Unfortunately, there were too many people around him. When they saw that the chief was confused, they rushed up without hesitation and forcibly pulled Huo Guanchen away from the cockpit. When he returned to Huo Xiaoheng's side, Huo Guanchen said with a cold expression, "Xiaoheng, that's your biological mother. You're just going to sit back and do nothing? If it was her, would you still be so calm?" Huo Guanchen pouted at Gun Yanji. Huo Xiaoheng frowned and said unhappily, "Miss Song is Miss Song and Yanji is Yanji. How can these 2 be mentioned in the same sentence? General Huo is too tired today, so he's talking nonsense. Why can't they be mentioned in the same sentence? One is your mother and the other is your fiancé. Can't they be compared?" Huo Guanchen's heart was burning with anxiety, but he could only force Huo Xiaoheng to speak up. Of course not. Huo Xiaoheng recalled what Lu Jin had just said and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He shook his head and said, "I have a mother-son relationship with Miss Song, and a romantic relationship with Nianji. How can they be compared?" Huo Guanchen was rendered speechless by Huo Xiaoheng. He snatched his guard's binoculars and stared ahead. Lu Yuan's yacht driving skills were much better than Deputy Director Jia's, and he was better at driving in extremely bad weather. Before long, he caught up to Deputy Director Jia's yacht and kept abreast of him. He wore far-infrared night vision goggles and looked carefully into the yacht. There were only 2 figures in the entire yacht. One was hunched over in the cockpit, and the other was tied up and stuffed into a cabin at the bottom of the yacht. Needless to say, the person who was tied up and stuffed into the bottom of the yacht was Song Jining. Lu Yuan was delighted. He took out the pistol from his waist and fired at the yacht that was moving abreast of him with one hand at the helm. Bang! Sparks flew from the yacht, but not a single bullet hole was made. The hull of the yacht was only slightly dented, leaving a crater. Lu Yuan narrowed his eyes. This yacht was powerful. It seemed to have been modified. Otherwise, how could it be bulletproof? This also showed that the enemy had been scheming and had already made thorough preparations. Lu Yuan held the rudder and gritted his teeth. He suddenly turned the rudder and slammed it into Deputy Director Jia's yacht. Deputy Director Jia's yacht driving skills were very average to begin with, and he didn't have actual combat training like Lu Yuan's. In addition, the weather was not good. It was already good enough that he could drive so far. How could he withstand being hit by other yachts? With the collision, his entire body fell into the cabin. The entire yacht instantly lost its direction and spun around a whirlpool on the sea. Lu Yuan panicked when he saw this. He didn't expect the other party to be so useless. The yacht was about to capsize after just one collision. He steeled his heart and drove the yacht into the whirlpool on the sea. The two white yachts chased each other in the ink-black whirlpool on the sea. After the yacht in front lost control for a while, it actually slowly kept up with the rhythm of the whirlpool. The situation of the yacht chasing behind wasn't much better. It had to try its best to control it so that it wouldn't be brought deeper into the sea by the whirlpool. Lu Yuan couldn't possibly keep chasing behind the yacht in front of him. He set his yacht to automatic driving and then came to the deck. The seawater in front of him had become a funnel that was crazily pouring in. He stood at the edge of the funnel, carrying the yacht's spare grappling rope on his back. His eyes were bright as he looked at the back side of the yacht in front of him. Clang. He suddenly reached out and threw the grappling rope in his hand, which happened to catch the white railing on the back side of the yacht in front of him. He tugged hard. After making sure that he had a firm grip, he took a few steps back, half-squatted, and started to run. Then he leaped up like a seagull, spreading its wings and soaring. The grappling rope guided his direction. He passed through the waves in the wind and rain and landed on the backside of the yacht in front of him with a bang. Lu Yuan rolled forward on the spot to remove the inertia of the impact. He crawled on the deck of the yacht and moved forward. Only then did Deputy Director Jia stand up from the ground and quickly grab the rudder to start the yacht. At that moment, he realized that someone was already piloting the yacht remotely. He put on his headphones and heard the person above him say anxiously, "Don't worry about the yacht. We've already got someone to take over. Hurry up and keep an eye on Song Jining. Don't let anything go wrong." Deputy Director Jia heaved a sigh of relief, then said angrily, "Since you can drive it remotely, why didn't you do it earlier? I'm not an expert." "What are you complaining about? Who knew that you'd be so useless? Don't tell me we're going to reveal all our secrets just for you?" Deputy Director Jia was scolded, but he was in a much better mood. He knew that he should be saved. The organization he had joined was said to be led by high-tech and very powerful. After leaving the cockpit, he walked towards the spiral staircase that led to the bottom of the yacht and went all the way down. At that moment, Lu Yuan had just found the spiral staircase. He looked around and found that Deputy Director Jia was not in the cockpit. The cockpit was empty. Lu Yuan's heart skipped a beat. He immediately realized that Deputy Director Jia might want to perish together with Song Jining. Without hesitation, he chased after him from the spiral staircase. In the bottom cabin of the yacht, Deputy Director Jia's face was flushed red. He picked up Song Jining, who was tied up, from the ground and pointed a gun at her head. He smiled sinisterly and said, "We're about to go out. We have nothing to do now. Either we die or we live, and you only death awaits. How about it? Before you die, have some fun with me. You won't be resentful when you die." Song Jining pursed her lips and said, "You touched me. I'll probably vomit all the way to my death." "You're still so stubborn." Deputy Director Jia's face darkened from Song Jining's mockery. He smashed the butt of his gun at her. Song Jining tilted her head. Her face wasn't hit, but her shoulder was hit hard and didn't feel good either. "How dare you dodge?" Deputy Director Jia grabbed her hair and pulled it back. Song Jining was forced to raise her head, which happened to be aimed at the middle of Deputy Director Jia's body. "Ugh." Song Jining did as she said and vomited. Deputy Director Jia flew into a rage out of humiliation. He was about to use force when he suddenly heard footsteps behind him. He suddenly shrank his neck and quickly turned behind Song Jining. He used her as a shield and pointed the gun at her head. He looked up just in time to see the door being kicked open and someone barging in. This is the third chapter of today's update, Chapter 2059. P.S. The second 100,000 Qidian coins awarded to the leader of Wu AI Hall in September has been sent with 2 updates. It's the third update today. A reminder for monthly votes and recommendation votes. Chapter 2071. Song Jining had a gun pointed at her temple, and the back of her neck was tightly gripped by Deputy Director Jia. She had no choice but to raise her head. When Lu Yuan rushed in, this was what he saw. He felt his mind buzz and he almost couldn't maintain the expression on his face. Deputy Director Jia looked at the person who rushed in. He was dripping wet and looked very disheveled. He was not wearing the military uniform of the local garrison. He immediately raised his hand and shot, but unfortunately he missed. He could only shout awkwardly, "Who are you? What are you doing on our yacht?" Lu Yuan forced himself to calm down as his mind raced. He thought to himself that there were clearly only 2 people on the yacht, and both of them were in the lower cabin, but the yacht was moving normally now, which meant that someone was remotely controlling the yacht. Since even the yacht could be remotely controlled, then this modified yacht must have surveillance cameras everywhere. Perhaps someone was watching everything that was happening here. In a flash, Lu Yuan gave up on his plan to end the battle quickly and deliberately said frivolously, "What can I do? I like the woman you brought up. Can we make a deal? Give her to me." Song Jining stared at the man in front of her with wide eyes, her heart pounding. At first she didn't recognize who this person was. It wasn't until this person spoke that she realized it was Lu Yuan. It seemed like he had disguised himself. She had long felt the strong wind and waves outside, and the yacht was shaking violently. However, she didn't think in any other direction. She only thought that the weather at sea was changeable, and it was entirely possible for there to be a storm. Later it was chaotic outside. She couldn't hear anything from the bottom cabin of the yacht, so she had no idea what was happening outside. Now that she saw Lu Yuan come in, she knew that he was definitely here to save her. She silently shut her mouth, but her pair of perfectly shaped willow leaf eyes stared at Lu Yuan without blinking. Lu Yuan looked calm on the surface, but under Song Jining's gaze he felt the tips of his ears heat up. Fortunately, the bottom cabin of the yacht was very dark. Otherwise someone might have seen through him. Deputy Director Jia heaved a sigh of relief. As long as it wasn't those pursuers, he wasn't that afraid. However, this person had come at the right time and he was a little worried. He pointed the gun at Song Jining's temple and asked Lu Yuan suspiciously, "When did you see her?" "When I brought her onto the boat, no one seemed to see her." "Hehe, I was on the yacht across from you." Lu Yuan pointed casually. "When you brought her onto the boat, I happened to get up to drink. I saw her through the window." As he spoke, he revealed an incomparably covetous expression. "I've never seen such a beautiful woman before." "You're so lucky. Where did you kidnap her from?" "I've never seen such a beautiful woman before." Deputy Director Jia saw that she was not a good person. And of Lu Yuan of Lu of family. Deputy Director Jia was relieved when he saw that this person wasn't a good person. He was afraid that those passers-by with a strong sense of justice would want to play the hero and save the damsel in distress. He still had to kill another person. Deputy Director Jia rolled his eyes and said, "That's none of your business." "Lu Jia," Jia said, of, Lu. "Hi and God to Lu of Kid of, he of Wei. Lu Hua and of, Luo of Wang of Hua to. Lu, to of Lu Man Ti. Lu Ti with of a Lu, to longer. Lu, it was obvious that he was a man who would risk his life for a woman. Deputy Director Jia despised him in his heart, but he still smiled and said, "Fine, since you fell in love with this woman at first sight, I'll give you a chance." Seeing that Lu Yuan was about to walk over, Deputy Director Jia quickly stopped him. "I have conditions. Don't come over now." Lu Yuan's heart ached when he saw that the gun had left a red mark on Song Jining's temple. He couldn't help but stop in his tracks and say with a smile, "What conditions?" "Just tell me. Do you want money? Name a price or you can sell her to me. I have plenty of money. Tell me how much you want." Deputy Director Jia chuckled and touched Song Jining's face. He said, "How many of such peerless beauties have you seen in your life? You're still asking for a price? This is a rare resource that can't be bought with money. Do you think I'll sell it to you?" Lu Yuan revealed a greedy expression. He took 2 steps forward and said, "Even if you don't sell it, you can at least retail it, right? How much do you want? I'll transfer it to you right away." Deputy Director Jia was the most greedy person. He thought for a few seconds and was about to offer a price when someone suddenly spoke from the Bluetooth headset he was wearing. "This person's background is fishy. Let's stabilize him first, then bring Song Jining into the motorboat. Give him this yacht and let him be the scapegoat." Deputy Director Jia's heart skipped a beat, but he still had a smile on his face. He tightened his grip on Song Jining's neck. Song Jining was caught off guard and let out a soft hiss. Lu Yuan didn't have time to defend himself, and his eyes couldn't help but reveal a pained expression. Deputy Director Jia immediately understood that this was a fake. This person was here to kill him. Deputy Director Jia's hands were unsteady. He grinned sinisterly and pulled Song Jining up to block in front of him. As he retreated, he said slowly, "Where do you want to do it? Why don't I do it first and then you do it? Just transfer me 10 million in cash to my bank account." As he spoke, he gave his bank account number. Lu Yuan looked at Deputy Director Jia speechlessly. He thought to himself that this guy was really greedy. He gave out his bank account number so casually. He took out his phone from his trouser pocket and said with a smile, 10 million just once? Aren't you being too ruthless? How about 1 million? Okay, 1 million it is, Deputy Director Jia said readily. At the same time he kicked back with one foot, and a door suddenly opened behind him. He pulled Song Jining back, and the sound of gunshots immediately rang out in the lower cabin. Lu Yuan hurriedly lay down. The bullets flew over his head, leaving bullet holes everywhere in the lower cabin. He hadn't expected that this modified yacht would even be equipped with a long-range gun. Lu Yuan's blood was stirred up. He fearlessly leaped up from the ground and used the momentum to pull down an iron chair that was welded to the ground to block his head. He was wearing a bulletproof vest made by Lu Jin, so he wasn't afraid of bullets. However, he didn't wear a hat on his head, so he could only rely on the small iron chair to block his head. But in this 3-minute delay, when he kicked open the small door that Deputy Director Jia had taken Song Jining to hide in, he found that they were already gone. If he continued forward, he would reach the opposite deck. There were a few small motorized lifeboats hanging on the edge of the deck, one of which was already missing. When he turned back, the deck of the previous room had been broken by a long-range gun, and seawater was pouring in. Lu Yuan made up his mind and rushed up to untie a motorboat. He used a special key to start it and quickly went out into the sea. The sea was still stormy, and the rain was so dense that it was hard to open one's eyes. It was dark again and visibility was almost zero. Lu Yuan put on his far-infrared night vision goggles and finally saw a motorboat speeding not far ahead. He held the motorboat with both hands and turned the engine to the maximum. He raced a snow-white waterway on the sea at night and chased after it without a care for anything else. Behind him, Huo Guanchen quickly caught up with the military's motorboat team. This was the first update of the day, Chapter 2060, The Rooster Crows Incessantly. It was still the third watch today. The second watch was 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and the third watch was 8:30 in the evening. They were all big chapters with rewards and updates. Because they owed too much, they could only pay it back with big chapters. Remind me of the monthly votes and recommendation votes? Chapter 2072. Lu Yuan received a message from his Bluetooth headset and knew that Huo Guanchen had brought the motorboat fleet over. This was a good thing because the more people there were, the better the ability to deal with all kinds of possible situations. From the modified yacht, he could tell that the person behind Deputy Director Jia was very powerful. To be able to remotely control a yacht and an automatic rifle, the other party's forces were not to be underestimated. He was worried that there would be more powerful obstacles waiting for him and Song Jining. However, he was also very anxious. He was worried that if Deputy Director Jia found out about such a big scene, he would go all out and kill him. Therefore, after thinking about it, he decided to catch up with Deputy Director Jia, divert his attention and delay as much time as possible so that the motorboat team could have a chance to capture all the people behind Deputy Director Jia. Having made up his mind, Lu Yuan drove the motorboat to its maximum speed. It was almost flying on the sea, creating a long mist that blocked his line of sight. In fact, after leaving the modified yacht, it was difficult for Deputy Director Jia to contact his superiors. Because the yacht had been modified and had a radio signal receiver, they could command and control it remotely. But now that he came out of the yacht, he was only driving a motorboat and he was getting closer and closer to the high seas. The network signal was already very weak. This was also China's territorial waters, so the people behind Deputy Director Jia did not dare to use satellites to contact him. Therefore, their connection was intermittent, which made Deputy Director Jia very anxious. He kept shouting, "Hey! Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Where is the warship? Which country is this warship from? I can hear you, speak slowly, the warships are temporarily unable to approach." The other party's words came out of the earpiece in fragments. "What do you mean we can't get close for now? I'm about to reach the international waters." Deputy Director Jia looked at the distance displayed on the motorboat and was extremely excited. As long as he reached the high seas, he would be able to shake off the person chasing after him. He was sure that the person who had broken into the yacht was most likely a plainclothes policeman. Song Jining was still tightly bound by him, and even her mouth was gagged. She was tied to the motorboat and stood behind Deputy Director Jia, acting as a shield for him again. If someone fired from behind, she would be the first to be hit. Song Jining kept turning back, but the wind and rain were so heavy that she couldn't even open her eyes. How could she see what was happening behind her through the dense rain? She was almost in despair when she suddenly felt the sea become even more turbulent. There was even a rumbling sound behind her, which was completely different from the sound of the heavy rain. Song Jining turned back again. This time she finally saw it clearly. It was Lu Yuan who was chasing after her in the motorboat. Just like how Moses led his people out of the Red Sea, he opened a channel in the dark sea. Deputy Director Jia also heard the rumbling sound coming from behind. His hands almost couldn't hold the motorboat. He was not very proficient, so he could only use the autopilot function to drive. He was that he jinxing so he that the speed of Jia increased and Shen. To Lu. That he was to Lu he. Lu Yuan's eyes were bloodshot. He crouched on the motorboat again and crashed into it from the back. Oh. He. With. I'm taking this peerless beauty away. Lu Yuan no longer hesitated. He held the motorboat firmly in his left hand and the pistol in his right hand. He shouted, "Get down." Song Jining understood and hurriedly bowed. Just as she bent over and lowered her head, Lu Yuan aimed at the back of Deputy Director Jia's head and pulled the trigger steadily. Bang! A few bullets shot out of the barrel and into the back of Deputy Director Jia's head before exiting from his forehead. Deputy Director Jia stared at the shadow of the warship in front of him, screamed, and rolled off the motorboat into the sea. The motorboat that he and Song Jining were on suddenly turned upside down in the sea like a headless fly. Song Jining was tied up, and her whole body flipped over in the cold sea with the motorboat. Lu Yuan plunged into the sea and quickly swam to the side of the overturned motorboat. He took a military knife and untied Song Jining from the bindings. After being tied up for a few hours, Song Jining's hands and feet were numb. As soon as the rope loosened, she sank into the water. Lu Yuan quickly grabbed her arm and pulled her up, hugging her tightly in his arms. Although the sea in winter hadn't frozen, it was still much colder than usual. Song Jining's lips were black from the cold. Her teeth chattered as she stammered. "Are you okay?" Lu Yuan lifted her out of the water and swam to the side of his motorboat. Just as he was about to put her on, drones the size of eagles suddenly flew over from the high seas. They were remotely controlled. They stepped closely on the high seas line and descended from the sky. They started shooting at Song Jining and Lu Yuan. Lu Yuan hurriedly pulled Song Jining down, and the two of them sank into the sea together. The sound of bullets entering the water could be heard above their heads, creating a large splash. Lu Yuan held Song Jining in his arms and swam underwater. He circled around the motorboat and swam to the other side to hide. The two of them held their breath in the sea for a long time. Lu Yuan could still hold on, but Song Jining couldn't. She was almost suffocating. Lu Yuan felt Song Jining's body in his arms getting heavier and heavier, and his heart tightened. With the sudden light from the sea above his head, he saw that Song Jining's face was purple. It turned out that she was short of oxygen. He lowered his eyes. In the deep blue sea, she looked at him with a smile. She didn't say anything, nor did she complain. It was as beautiful as a dream. However, her hand gradually loosened, and her smile gradually blurred. Even her clear eyes were about to close. Lu Yuan pursed his lips, slowly lowered his head and leaned towards Song Jining. Just as he was about to reach her lips, Lu Yuan said hoarsely, "It's an emergency." Then he kissed her lips. Her lips were even more beautiful than he had imagined. The moment he touched her lips, all the blood in his body was screaming, wanting to break through the restraints of his blood vessels. His bones were so stiff that he couldn't move. However, he didn't indulge in her lips. Instead, he quickly stuck out the tip of his tongue, pried open her lips, separated her teeth, and sent all the oxygen he had left into her mouth. Song Jining gradually recovered from Lu Yuan's oxygen delivery. Lu Yuan ignored the danger to his life and floated to the surface of the sea. He took a deep breath and sank back into the sea to deliver air to Song Jining. After a few times, Song Jining finally recovered. Song Jining felt bad and wanted to go up to breathe herself, but Lu Yuan didn't allow her to go up. He was worried that she would be hit by the drones flying on the sea. Now, not only had the other party sent out the drones, but they had also asked the drones to turn on their lights. The sea was illuminated as if it was daytime. Two pitch-black motorboats, one upside down and one upside down, could be seen floating on the surface of the sea. When Hua Guanchen arrived with the motorboat troops, he saw the two empty motorboats and was very anxious. He looked around and immediately found the drones that were still testing the waters at the edge of the high seas. He was immediately angry and ordered in a deep voice, "Drones, get ready. The coordinates are the high seas." He reported the coordinates of the waters where the drones were located on the high seas, even including the warships not far away. Anyway, nothing that happened on the high seas was illegal, so Huo Guanchen didn't care. He wouldn't fight with the other party on the high seas. He was used to attacking directly, and it was best if he hit the other party's nest. Not long after, the drones Huo Xiaoheng sent swarmed over. They were almost 10 times the number of drones. This time, it was a dense swarm of drones that whizzed over like a hornet's nest. The firepower was fiercer, the aim was more accurate, and the attack range was wider. Soon, the other party's drones hovering near the high seas were all shot down by the drone swarms sent by Huo Xiaoheng. He even deliberately let go of a few drones and then drove his own drone army to chase the other party's warships. When the other party's warships saw that the Wuxia Empire military didn't tolerate it and actually attacked in one go, they immediately panicked. They quickly set sail on the sea, turned into an extremely large S-shaped waterway and fled in panic. The other party fled too quickly. The drones commanded by Huo Xiaoheng only had time to drop a few small bombs around their waterway, causing a splash. This made the other party think that they were really going to fight, so they didn't dare to fight. Huo Guanchen led the motorboat troops to fire warning shots at the border between the high seas and the Wuxia Empire's exclusive economic zone to supervise the other party's departure. After the other party had completely evacuated, Lu Yuan brought Song Jining to the surface. Huo Guanchen saw them at a glance and quickly sent someone to fish them out of the sea. Song Jining was still wearing a woolen sweater. Her entire body was drenched and hung heavily on her body. She kept shivering. Huo Guanchen's heart tightened. He immediately took off his military uniform and put it on Song Jining. However, Song Jining dodged to the side and hugged Lu Yuan's arm. "Let's go back quickly. Xiaoheng and the others must be getting impatient, right?" As they spoke, the roar of a helicopter sounded above their heads again. Song Jining looked up and saw that it was a helicopter with the logo of the Wuxia Empire Military Special Operations Forces flying over. She was immediately happy. "Xiaoheng came to pick us up?" Lu Yuan nodded. At the same time, he said magnanimously, "General Hua also contributed a lot. If General Hua hadn't arrived with his men, we might not have been able to float up from the sea." Song Jining turned around to look at Huo Guanchen. She saw that he was holding his military jacket and was retracting his hand awkwardly. Song Jining smiled faintly and nodded. "Thank you, General Hua. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have ended up like this." Huo Guanchen. Lu Yuan wasn't very clear about the entanglement between Song Jining and Guo Huaining. He just put his hand on Song Jining's shoulder and raised his hand to pull the rope ladder that had fallen from the helicopter. He urged, "Jining, you go up first." Huo Guanchen was stunned again, and his eyes immediately narrowed. Even the way he addressed her had changed. What had happened just now that he didn't know? Song Jining nodded. "I'll go up first. You should come up quickly too." Lu Yuan laughed. "I'll go up first. You should come up quickly too." Song Jining climbed up the rope ladder without looking back. Gu Nianji poked her head out and smiled as she handed her hand to her. "Miss Song, this way." Song Jining smiled, grabbed Gu Nianji's hand and climbed up with all her might. As soon as she went up, Gu Nianji handed her a bag of clothes and said, "Miss Song, quickly go over there and change out of your wet clothes." Song Jining didn't bother with pleasantries. Seeing that there was a door in the corner of the helicopter, she quickly walked in and took off all her wet clothes. She changed into the clothes that Gu Nianji had brought for her. Gu Nianji was very careful this time. She had brought everything from the inside to the outside. Song Jining only felt alive after changing into clean and refreshing clothes. She pushed open the small door and came out. Seeing that Lu Yuan had also come up, she quickly said, "Xiao Lu, you should go and change too." Gu Nianji had also brought a set of clothes for Lu Yuan, which was prepared by Huo Xiaoheng. Lu Yuan wiped his head with a towel and went in to change as well. Song Jining changed her clothes and wiped her head as she sat by the window. She looked down at the sea and saw that the motorboat fleet was still quietly lined up on the sea. Huo Guanchen stood alone on the command boat and looked up at the helicopter. Song Jining pursed her lips and said to Gu Nianji, "Nianji, shall we change seats?" "Sure." Gu Nianji agreed without hesitation and sat by the window. She casually glanced out of the window and saw Huo Guanchen. She immediately understood. She held Song Jining's hand and looked her up and down. "Are you okay? Where's Deputy Director Jia?" Song Jining looked fine, but there was a red mark on her temple as if she had been pointed at by a gun. There were also faint strangulation marks on her neck, and her face was relatively pale. Chunlai also rushed over. He came over with a medical box to examine Song Jining's body. As he took her pulse, he said, "Fortunately, Director Song wasn't injured." She was just frightened and her heart was beating faster. Song Jining blushed a little. Her heart was beating fast, but it wasn't because she was frightened. Gu Nianji waited by the side. After Qin Lai finished his examination and went to examine Lu Yuan, Gu Nianji continued to ask, "Did you fall into the sea just now? Who saved you?" "It was Xiao Lu," Song Jining said generously and turned to look at Lu Yuan. Lu Yuan didn't look at her. Instead he was focused on talking to Qin Lai. From her angle she could only see Lu Yuan's back. Song Jining was suddenly startled. However, she quickly retracted her gaze and continued to say to Gu Nianji, "The other party came prepared this time and their technical methods are very clever. Even a piece of trash like Deputy Director Jia can compete with CEO Lu." Gu Nianji quickly nodded and agreed. "The other party is indeed very powerful. I heard from my dad that the technical methods used by the other party this time are even higher than chaos mathematics." Song Jining frowned and said, "It's not just chaos mathematics. She wanted to talk about the explosion, but she looked at Gu Nianji and didn't continue. Instead she changed the topic and whispered, "Are you okay? I saw someone forge your photo." Gu Nianji didn't know about this yet. She was shocked. "Forged my photo? What photo?" This was the second chapter of today's update, Chapter 2061, Seeing a Gentleman. P.S. The third 100,000 Qidian coins as a reward to the president of Wu AI Hall in September has been delivered with 2 updates. It was the third watch today. 8:30 p.m. on the third watch. They were all big chapters of rewards and updates. A reminder for monthly votes and recommendation votes. Chapter 2073. Song Jining wasn't a person who was good at chatting. Seeing Gu Nianji's shocked expression, she wanted to shut up again. However, Gu Nianji could hear the hidden meaning in her words and wouldn't let her off so easily. "Miss Song, why were you captured by them? Is it related to what you just said?" Gu Nianji asked in confusion. Song Jining closed her eyes and rubbed her forehead. "I have a headache. I'll answer your question after I get some sleep." She tilted her head and fell asleep against the seat. Gu Nianji stared at Song Jining for a while and thought about what had happened that day. She had been in danger at the Sheraton Hotel, and Song Jining had been lured out of the imperial capital with a detour. She hadn't thought about why Song Jining would drive out alone at night and be lured out of the imperial capital. Now that she thought about it, did it have something to do with Song Jining's forged photos? Lu Yuan finished his checkup and walked over from behind. He sat on the other side of the aisle next to Song Jining. Qin Lai sat behind him with the medicine box. There were also a few soldiers in the front and back rows. Xiaoheng was the one driving the helicopter. There were so many people in the helicopter that it was packed to the brim. The engine of the helicopter rumbled. If they weren't very close, they would have to rely on roars to communicate. Because they were worried about Song Jining and Lu Yuan's injuries, and Lu Jin was also anxious to see them, Xiaoheng and Gu Nianji didn't continue to ask questions. The helicopter whizzed through the night sky, and Gu Nianji looked ahead through the window. In the territorial waters not far away, the clouds had already dispersed, revealing the dark peacock blue night sky. The moon hung in the air like a willow leaf, and there was an indescribable elegance and tranquility in its delicate manner. Of course, the heavy rain was gone, and the strong wind had stopped. The harbor that had been in the middle of the storm was now as peaceful and beautiful as a meticulous painting. Gu Nianji sighed and thought to herself that the weather weapon was really too awesome. If it could really be controlled by energy, wouldn't it be able to hit wherever it was pointed? Lu Yuan seemed to have heard Gu Nianji's thoughts and suddenly sent her a text message. "The other party seems to know that we're using the weather weapon. Gu Nianji." She looked down at her phone and replied after a while, "Was there anyone else present when my dad made the suggestion? How did this information get leaked?" It was no wonder that Deputy Director Jia knew that it would be very eye-catching for him to go out alone when the other yachts cancelled their races and went ashore. Lu Yuan shook his head and replied, "It might not be a leak. When Director Song wakes up, you can discuss it with her and Professor Lu." Gu Nianji raised her eyebrows. Did Lu Yuan have more direct evidence to prove that there wasn't a mole leaking the secret? In the middle of the night, the Special Operations Forces armed helicopter slowly landed at the Special Operations Forces headquarters airport. As soon as the sound of the propellers stopped, Gu Nianji jumped out of the plane. Lu Jin, Zhao Liangzi, and Yin Shixiang waited by the side. "Dad." Gu Nianji ran over, her eyes sparkling with adoration and admiration. "You're amazing. Too cool. Weather weapon. His control is practically at the point of perfection. Adding a little more would be too much and subtracting a little would be showing weakness. Lu Jin's heart, which had been in high spirits, finally relaxed. The corners of his mouth curled up as he patted Gunyenji's head and praised himself without hesitation. Of course. He had taught them a good lesson. Something like a weather weapon does require an extremely strong control system. Their hardware equipment is not bad, but the software system is too poor. I casually changed it for them. Although it's not as perfect as I thought, it's already much better than the weather weapons of the other countries on Blue Planet. Lu Yuan walked over at this moment. When he heard Lu Jin boast shamelessly about himself, the corners of his lips twitched and he said lightly, "Maybe it was because you changed so perfectly that you attracted the attention of those people." Gunyenji blinked. Only then did she understand what Lu Yuan meant by, "It might not be a leak." Lu Jin had always been stubborn, especially when it came to scientific research. He immediately said, "Boss Lu, what do you mean? Is it wrong to be too perfect?" "Dad, let's go back and talk. You're not going to argue with President Lu here, are you?" Gunyenji glanced around and hugged Lu Yuan's arm. Lu Jin snorted. "Let's go back and talk. I'm not afraid of him." As they spoke, Song Jining also came over. When she saw Lu Jin, her eyes lit up like Gunyenji's. She said, "Professor Lu, are you here to pick up Nyenji?" At the airport of the headquarters of the Special Operations Forces, the bright street lamps shone silver light. The surrounding night was even darker, but it was as bright as day here. Lu Jin looked at her, then at Lu Yuan, who acted as if nothing had happened, except that the tips of his ears were a little red. He sneered and said, "Boss Lu, what did you promise me? Do you want me to show you the evidence?" Lu Yuan. He quickly glanced at Song Jining and said to Lu Jin, "We'll talk when we get back. This is the airport." "Ha, don't even think about going back on your word." Lu Jin snorted. Yin Shixiang had followed Lu Jin all the way from sending him to the weather weapon control room in the courtyard of the military headquarters, to returning from there, and then to the airport here. He had never left Lu Jin's side. Zhao Liangzi had received the news from Hua Xiaoheng, so he had brought his men over to welcome them. The last to get out of the helicopter were Hua Xiaoheng and Chen Lai. One was tall and the other short, the other fat and the other thin, but they were surprisingly harmonious. "What are you standing here for? Let's go to my place." Hua Xiaoheng strode over and held Gunyenji's hand. Gunyenji had no choice but to jog to keep up and was pulled to the car next to her by Hua Xiaoheng. It was Hua Xiaoheng's private car, and the driver was his chauffeur, Fan Jian. After Gunyenji sat in the car, she wanted to talk about what had happened tonight, especially the forged photos that Song Jining had just mentioned. However, when she saw that Fan Jian and Zhao Liangzi were still in the front passenger seat, she swallowed her words and greeted them with a smile. "Brother Zhe, I'm so sorry to disturb your sleep so late." However, there was no hint of embarrassment in her tone. "Do you have times when you're embarrassed?" Zhao Liangzi laughed and turned to look at her. He looked at her carefully and nodded. "Fortunately, you're not injured?" "I'm not only not injured, I didn't fall into a trap at all." Gunyenji beamed with joy as she crossed her arms and leaned against the back seat. She chatted with Zhao Liangzi and waited for Hua Xiaoheng to get into the car. She looked at Fan Jian and greeted him with a smile. Fan Jian was acquainted with her, so he turned back with a smile. "Hello, Miss Gu." Gunyenji continued to make conversation. She leaned forward and clung to the front seat. She asked curiously, "Fan Jian, that's an interesting name. I've been curious about it for a long time. Why did your parents give you that name?" Fan Jian immediately understood what Gunyenji meant. He huffed and puffed for a long time before saying, "I changed my name, but it's better than my old name." This was a changed name? What kind of weird name was it before? Gunyenji's eyebrows nearly shot up. Zhao Liangzi's shoulders shook with laughter. Gunyenji turned to look at him. "Brother Zhe, do you know about it?" "A lot of people know about it. It's not like it's something shameful." Fan Jian laughed at himself. "My dad's surname is Fan and my mom's surname is Hao. They used to name me Fan Jian Hao." Gunyenji was speechless. In that case the name Fan Jian was better, although not by much. Gunyenji patted his seat sympathetically. "Little Fan has a hard time." The people in the car chatted and laughed until Hua Xiaoheng opened the car door and got in. Gunyenji didn't see Lu Jin follow her, so she quickly asked, "Where's my dad?" "Professor Lu wants to be in the same car as President Lu and Ms. Song. He said he has something to ask," Hua Xiaoheng said with a smile as he sat down beside Gunyenji. This was the third update of the day, Chapter 2062, Cloudbeard is not happy. P.S. Sent to the leader of Wu AI Hall, the leader of September Sheng. It was the third update today. Remind me about the monthly votes and recommendation votes. Chapter 2074. Gu Nianji recalled how Lu Jin and Lu Yuan had wanted to say something but hesitated. Her eyes darted around and she immediately understood. She smiled slyly and said, "Hey, I really want to watch." It would be great if she could see Xiao Lu propose with her own eyes. She knew that her father was a man of his word. If he asked Xiao Lu to propose to Miss Song, he would do it. If Xiao Lu didn't ask, he would definitely throw out the video. Gu Nianji's guess was right. In another car, Lu Jin was sitting between Lu Yuan and Song Jining. He winked at Lu Yuan proudly. "Boss Lu, what about what you promised me?" "Lu Yuan, why did these words sound so awkward?" Lu Yuan moved to the side without a trace. Fortunately, this was a modified military SUV that Hua Xiaoheng and the others had brought. The back seat was spacious enough. Song Jining had been looking out of the car window uneasily. Hearing Lu Jin's meaningful words, her eyes drifted to the side. Lu Yuan happened to be looking in her direction. Both of their eyes met. Song Jining had always been very direct when it came to relationships. If she liked someone, she liked them. If she didn't like them, she didn't like them. She never hesitated. However, Lu Yuan's eyes were too deep, and his emotions were extremely restrained. Moreover, the two of them didn't cross the line at all when they were usually together, giving her a chance to daydream. Therefore, even someone as confident as her was a little uncertain. However, this time, when Lu Yuan gave her air at the bottom of the sea, she really felt a little different. However, she still couldn't make up her mind whether this difference was because she was overthinking or because artificial respiration was done like this. Lu Yuan stared at Song Jining. The light in the car was relatively dim, so he could only see Song Jining through the flashing light of the street lamps by the roadside. Her beautiful face and youthful face were exactly the same as when he had left 18 years ago. But he was already old. Lu Yuan's hands tightened and he coughed. Suddenly he couldn't say a word. All his courage seemed to have been used up when Song Jining was in danger. At that time he seemed to be able to say anything without any psychological barriers. But now he had to say it in front of Song Jining. Lu Yuan supported his head with his hand and leaned against the window. He sighed and said, "Professor Lu, I'll make you a delicious supper when we get back. What do you want to eat? What about Nianji? Should I give her a call and ask her?" As he spoke, his eyes turned slightly. The wrinkles at the corners of his eyes were clear and deep as he looked at Song Jining. "Superintendent Song, what do you want to eat? Do you want to buy some groceries on the way?" Lu Jin rolled his eyes and hesitated for a second between going back to eat delicious food and watching Lu Yuan propose. He lowered his head and took out his phone. He sent Gu Nianji a text message and asked her, "What do you want for supper?" Boss Lu said to go back and do it. After sending one message, he sent another one. "It's a pity that I can't watch Boss Lu propose. He threatened me with making delicious food." Gu Nianji saw the message Lu Jin had sent her in the car in front of her. She was instantly delighted and replied with a smile, "Of course I'll cook something delicious first. And then propose. Please postpone it. I want to watch too." When Lu Jin saw the reply, he also laughed. He thought to himself that it was better to have fun together than to have fun alone. If there was such a good show, he would definitely drag his girl along to watch it. He immediately became confident and said to Lu Yuan, "It's too late. I'm afraid I don't have that much time to cook. Why don't we each have a bowl of your famous chicken soup noodles? I remember you were cooking a pot of chicken soup in the kitchen." Lu Yuan glanced at him. "You have a good memory. You even remember the things in the kitchen so clearly. That's for sure. I can forget anything, but I won't forget the kitchen." Lu Jin smiled and nudged Song Jining's arm. "Superintendent Song, do you like noodles?" Song Jining smiled and said, "I'm not picky about food. It's good to have some noodles tonight. I've been hungry all night. At most, I'll eat it and lose weight tomorrow." Lu Jin gave her a thumbs up. Superintendent Song is so open-minded. Unlike some people who don't keep their word and only know how to change the subject. He winked at Song Jining. "Superintendent Song, after you finish the chicken soup noodles, I'll show you something nice. I guarantee it'll help with digestion." Song Jining smiled and nodded. "Okay, you really can't sleep immediately after eating. It'll cause indigestion." Lu Yuan was a little nervous at the side. His palms were sweating, but he was looking forward to it. The military vehicle opened the way and sped down the highway at night. Soon, it entered the imperial capital's third ring highway. Because Lu Jin and Gu Nianji both said they wanted to go to Song Jining's house for supper, Hua Xiaoheng asked Fan Jian to send them to Song Jining's apartment complex. Yin Shixiang, Zhao Liangze, and Qinlai followed Fan Jian back to the Special Operations Forces headquarters base. Hua Xiaoheng brought Gu Nianji into the elevator. Lu Jin, Lu Yuan, and Song Jining soon returned. For safety's sake, Hua Xiaoheng still sent people to monitor the entire neighborhood. It was loose on the outside but tight on the inside in case the other party had any more tricks up their sleeves. As soon as Lu Jin entered the door, he saw Gu Nianji and Hua Xiaoheng sitting on the sofa in the living room. He immediately shouted, "Why are you guys so fast? Nianji, are you hungry?" Gu Nianji stood up and blinked at him. "I'm so hungry I can eat a cow." "Then let Boss Lu fry you another steak?" Lu Jin quickly suggested. Gu Nianji rolled her eyes. "Okay, fry a steak, but it's not for me, it's for Major General Hua." Hua Xiaoheng stood up and said politely to Lu Jin, "Thank you for the reminder, Uncle Lu." Lu Jin choked for a moment. He thought to himself, the steak is for my girl. Who asked for it for you? However, seeing how good Hua Xiaoheng was to his girl, giving it to Hua Xiaoheng would be rounding it up, so it would be considered giving it to his girl. After Lu Jin's reasoning, he quickly turned around and said to Lu Yuan, "Boss Lu, for bowls of chicken soup noodles and a special steak, medium well." Lu Yuan nodded. "I'll make it right away." Without another word, he went into the kitchen and continued making supper, so he didn't want to be alone with Song Jining. Song Jining didn't mind and said to Gu Nianji, "Nianji, do you want to take a shower? I'll go to the master bathroom and you can go to Professor Lu's guest bathroom?" Gu Nianji waved her hand. "I don't need it. I'll shower when I get back. Miss Song, you can go and clean up." Song Jining had only wiped her body and changed her clothes on the plane today, but she still didn't feel very comfortable. She didn't stand on ceremony and went into the master bedroom bathroom to take a shower. Hua Xiaoheng went to the balcony to make a call and arrange for the follow-up. Gu Nianji and Lu Jin met in the living room to discuss how to get Lu Yuan to propose later. But soon, the smell of chicken soup wafting out of the kitchen made them unable to continue their conversation. "Dad, let's talk after we eat. How about that?" Gu Nianji gulped. Lu Jin nodded heavily. "Of course, let's eat first and talk later." Not long after, Lu Yuan brought 4 bowls of chicken soup noodles and freshly fried steak to the dining room and called them over for supper. Gu Nianji and Lu Jin arrived at the dining room first, and Hua Xiaoheng came in after a while. Lu Yuan didn't see Song Jining, so he couldn't help looking around and asked, "Where's Director Song?" Lu Jin was about to speak when Gu Nianji rolled her eyes and shook her head slightly at him. She then said to Lu Yuan with a frown, "I don't know. Miss Song said she wasn't feeling well just now and wanted to go back to her room to rest. I don't know how she's doing now. Sigh, Miss Song is really pitiful. She's all alone and can only rely on herself when she's sick. I don't even know if she's taking medicine." Lu Jin was a little confused. Didn't Qinlai check that she was fine just now? Gu Nianji quietly stepped on Lu Jin's foot. While he was lowering his head, she quickly said to Lu Yuan, "I think Director Song has a mental illness." Lu Yuan narrowed his eyes and put down his chopsticks without batting an eyelid. He said, "I'll go take a look." Gu Nianji was almost smiling like a little fox. If Hua Xiaoheng hadn't stopped her, she would have really run over to watch. This was the first update of the day, Chapter 2063, It's Better to Be Happy Alone. There were 2 updates today. 8:30 p.m. the next night. Remind me of the monthly votes and recommendation votes. Chapter 2075. Lu Yuan came to Song Jining's bedroom and gently knocked on the door. Then he waited at the door for a while. There seemed to be a sound inside and then it became quiet again. There was still no one to open the door. Lu Yuan was a little hesitant. He didn't know how Song Jining was doing inside. When Lu Yuan knocked on the door, Song Jining had just turned off the shower and wrapped her body in a 1.5 meter long and 1 meter wide white bath towel. She didn't hear the faint knock on the door. She wrapped her wet hair in a towel of the same color before walking out of the bathroom and sitting down in front of the dressing table in the bedroom. Song Jining's dressing table was very simple and elegant. There was almost nothing else on the table except a comb and a bottle of cream. Could be said to be very minimalist. She took off the white dry towel wrapped around her head and was about to comb her hair when she heard a bang behind her. Someone pushed open the door and came in. Song Jining had just escaped from a kidnapping. Her nerves were still slightly relaxed after being extremely nervous, but she was still extremely vigilant. Hearing someone barge in, she suddenly turned around and stared in the direction of the bedroom door. Because she turned too fast and used too much force, the bath towel wrapped around her chest actually loosened and was about to fall off. Song Jining didn't notice the danger of the bath towel on her chest, but Lu Yuan saw it clearly. Her exposed skin was still stained with sparkling water droplets. It was as white as mutton fat jade. No, it was even more flawless than mutton fat jade because it was alive and warm. Her white and plump breasts were set off by the hanging bath towel into a perilous valley. It made one's heart skip a beat, but they couldn't bear to look away. Song Jining twisted her body and stood in front of the dressing table. Her S-shaped curves were even more obvious. Her face was slightly red because of surprise. Her rosy lips were slightly open, revealing a little bit of snow white inside her lips. It was her braided teeth that he had just tasted not long ago, lively and fragrant. These 4 words popped up in Lu Yuan's mind. Then he took a big stride forward. His movements were faster than his mind, and he pressed down on Song Jining's bath towel that was about to fall off. At this moment Song Jining's mind buzzed. It was as if fireworks had bloomed all over the sky. All her rational thoughts were on holiday to watch the fireworks. She couldn't think at all, let alone react. Lu Yuan pressed down on her bath towel with his hand, not daring to use too much force. He lowered his eyes to look at her and found that on her white jade-like face, a trace of red slowly climbed up her cheeks, and then from her cheeks to her flawless white face, that bright color seeped out from the bottom of her skin, like old wine, making people drunk just by smelling it. Song Jining had just taken a shower. Her eyes were clear like the clear sky after the rain. Only the corners of her eyes were slightly red, but it wasn't because she had cried. Instead, it was because peach blossoms had fallen from the branches and stained the corners of her eyes and eyebrows. Lu Yuan's eyes darkened and he said hoarsely, "Your bath towel isn't tied properly. It's about to fall. Do you want me to tie it for you?" His gaze was no longer repressed, no longer reserved. He looked at her with unbridled longing. Song Jining had just snapped out of her daze when she fell into Lu Yuan's affectionate gaze. Her rational mind was still looking at the fireworks, and her subconscious answer was pure linear thinking. Yes. Lu Yuan's heart skipped a beat when he saw that not only did she not refuse, but she was also unguarded against him. It was as if there was a little person in his mind constantly nagging, "Tell me, tell me, tell me." Before he could think of what to do, his nimble fingers had already tied the bath towel for Song Jining. His gesture was extremely gentle, and he was very careful to avoid arousing suspicion. He didn't touch the skin on Song Jining's chest at all, but it was this kind of faint force that made a woman's muscles and bones go limp. Song Jining really couldn't stand anymore. She was already exhausted today, and now even her emotions were about to be overdrawn. Her soft and beautiful body was on the verge of collapse in front of Lu Yuan. Lu Yuan tied the bath towel for her. A strong arm crossed her willow-like waist and picked her up. Song Jining leaned against his arm to prevent herself from collapsing to the ground. Lu Yuan looked at her deeply. He slowly bent down and approached her bit by bit. Finally he stopped 0.1 centimeters away from her trembling lips. A hoarse voice came out of his lips. Can I kiss you?" He was so close that Song Jining could clearly feel the hot aura when he spoke. He smelled so good. Song Jining thought vaguely and blinked. Her long eyelashes, which were like crow's feathers, fluttered like 2 rows of small fans. To Lu Yuan, Song Jining's blink was like a butterfly flapping its wings above the Amazon River in South America, setting off a torrential storm on the other side of the blue planet. All his caution and forbearance were completely destroyed by the storm. He no longer hesitated and gently touched forward. He pushed the distance of 0.1 centimeters closer and pressed his lips against her moist and soft lips. This feeling was completely different from when he had transferred air to her at the bottom of the sea not long ago. It was hundreds, thousands and tens of thousands of times better than that. It was something he hadn't dared to think about in the past 18 years, nor could he think about it. He tasted her lips over and over again. His arms locked tightly around her and held her in his arms. Song Jining felt like the air in her chest was about to be squeezed out, but she didn't feel uncomfortable. Lu Yuan's kiss made her heart beat faster and her consciousness blur. She still remembered that he smelled good, so what did he taste like? With this thought in mind, Song Jining couldn't help but open her mouth, stick out her tongue and lick Lu Yuan's lips. Really tasted good. She smacked her lips and wanted to continue licking him, but Lu Yuan suddenly tightened his grip. He also stuck out his tongue and tasted her mouth. Song Jining wasn't used to such a deep kiss. She planned to use the tip of her tongue to push Lu Yuan's tongue out. However, as soon as the tip of her tongue came over, it was wrapped by Lu Yuan's tongue. It was as if it was wrapped in supreme honey. He sucked and smashed it over and over again. Song Jining felt like her tongue was about to be sucked out by Lu Yuan. She couldn't help but clench her fists and knock on his hard shoulder. She mumbled indistinctly, "Be gentler." Lu Yuan stiffened for a moment and relaxed slightly. But then the kiss became even more ferocious and he almost folded her down. Song Jining's rational thinking had completely left home. She could only rely on her instincts to snuggle into Lu Yuan's arms and let him do whatever he wanted. After an unknown period of time, Lu Yuan finally let go of her lips slightly and looked down. Her full lips seemed to be smeared with rouge. They were dazzlingly red and her swollen lips were pursed. Lu Yuan smiled slightly. Every line in the corner of his eyes contained unspeakable affection. He kissed her again and said hoarsely, "Jining, marry me?" This was the second chapter of today, chapter 2064, The Wings of a Butterfly. There were 2 chapters today. Tomorrow there would be the 3rd chapter to pay off the debt. Haha, he finally proposed, "Remind me of the monthly votes and recommendation votes." Chapter 2076. When Lu Yuan said this, he didn't use an imperative tone, nor did he use a question. Instead, he directly said, "Marry me." He was resolute and straightforward. He didn't beat around the bush, nor did he leave any suspense. It was very different from his usual style. It was really too different. And this style was surprisingly accepted and agreed with by Song Jining. Her attitude towards relationships was the same as her attitude towards scientific research. It was straightforward, without beating around the bush and without leaving any suspense. It wasn't that she was unaware of Lu Yuan's feelings for her, but because of her personality she wouldn't agree with that kind of natural relationship. She needed to be very frank and she also needed to be very clear. Just like what Lu Yuan had said just now, "Jining, marry me?" In Song Jining's concept, this was a very perfect proposition. Now it was time for her to throw out the question. She looked at Lu Yuan emotionally and asked, "Why do you want me to marry you?" Lu Yuan's smile became deeper and deeper. He thought to himself that only a genius could understand a genius' train of thought. Lu Yuan had never even dared to think of such a straightforward question before. His hand gradually moved up and grabbed the back of Song Jining's neck. He whispered, "Of course it's because I love you." He once thought that he would never be able to say this in his life. He didn't expect that under Song Jining's gaze, he almost blurted it out. However, Song Jining was already past the age where a man would die for him just because he said, "I love you." She still stared at him and said faintly, "Then it's fine if we love each other. Why do you want me to marry you?" You have to know that there's no logical relationship between falling in love and getting married. Not every love will lead to marriage. Not every marriage will have love. Song Jining's voice was very calm, but if one listened carefully, they could hear a little uncertainty in her tone. Lu Yuan had a headache, but he also felt proud. The woman he loved was different from ordinary women. She wouldn't run away with someone just because he gave her a piece of candy. In fact, Song Jining was thinking about her marriage to Huo Guanchen. She and he had once truly loved each other, but that love couldn't beat all kinds of unexpected events over the years. In the end, the 2 of them ended tragically. Thinking of Huo Guanchen, Song Jining's expression turned cold. She still had a score to settle with this person. Lu Yuan's heart skipped a beat when he saw Song Jining's expression change. His mind raced, but he couldn't figure out what he had done wrong to make Song Jining unhappy. He didn't dare to act rashly, nor did he want to force her too much. He took a step back and put on a gentlemanly manner. He held Song Jining's hand and kissed it on the back, and said with a smile, "Then we'll love." Song Jining's heart felt a little calm, and nodded with a smile. She, is, you, t, and t. Single quote, I Lu what as the t. What a coincidence. Me too, Lu Yuan said with a smile. After the 2 of them finished speaking, Lu Yuan went out first and waited at the door. Song Jining changed into her own clothes and the 2 of them went to the restaurant together. When they arrived at the restaurant, Lu Yuan thought that Lu Jin and the others had been waiting for a long time. He was about to apologize when he suddenly caught a glimpse of the water droplet-shaped alarm clock on the wall from the corner of his eye. He realized that only 5 minutes had passed. Why did it feel like a lifetime had passed? Lu Yuan shook his head and quickly glanced at Song Jining. Song Jining's expression remained the same as usual as she calmly sat down beside him. Lu Yuan placed the bowl of chicken soup noodles in front of her and picked up a piece of noodles with his chopsticks. He smiled and said, Try it and see if it suits your taste. Song Jining ate it with his hand. Gun Yanji, Lu Jin, Hua Xiaoheng, the 6 eyes of the 3 of them stared at Lu Yuan and Song Jining. Song Jining acted as if she didn't see it. She also picked up a piece of noodles with her chopsticks and brought it to Lu Yuan's mouth. Tastes good. Do you want to try it too? Lu Yuan ate it with a smile. Because he was eating noodles, his chopsticks took a long time to eat. After he slowly finished eating the noodles with chopsticks, he took a tissue and handed it to Song Jining. Then he turned to look at the 3 people beside him with different expressions and said lightly, "What are you looking at? Haven't you seen people eat noodles before?" Song Jining held back her laughter and lowered her head to continue eating the chicken soup noodles. Needless to say, Lu Yuan's cooking was really impeccable. Lu Jin couldn't hold it in anymore. He slammed his chopsticks on the dining table and shouted, "What happened just now that we don't know about? Boss Lu, tell me the truth." Gun Yanji also smiled and propped her head on her hand. She winked at Song Jining and said, "I refuse dog food. Midnight snacks turned into dog food. Have you asked the feelings of these chicken soup noodles? Miss Song, you only went to take a shower. Why do you seem to have a boyfriend when you come back?" Hua Xiaoheng thought about it and felt that it was better not to speak. Lu Jin looked at Lu Yuan's smiling eyes, then at Song Jining's slightly red cheeks. He slammed the table and his heart was burning with anxiety. "What's going on?" Song Jining smiled at Lu Yuan. Seeing him nod slightly, she said, "Yes, it's exactly what you saw. I'm with President Lu." "What do you mean you're together?" "Miss Song, don't avoid the point," Gun Yanji shouted. She was asking the question that Hua Xiaoheng wanted to ask but couldn't. Lu Yuan had no choice but to say softly, "Jining just agreed to be my girlfriend." Gun Yanji, Lu Jin. This was different from what they had agreed on. Song Jining couldn't hold back the smile on her face. She held Lu Yuan's hand under the dining table and said, "I'm lucky to be with such a good man like President Lu." Gun Yanji felt that something was wrong. She glanced at Lu Yuan and then at Song Jining. She said carefully, "Together? Are you guys getting married?" Lu Yuan's expression was slightly restrained. Song Jining smiled and waved her hand. She said bluntly, "At my age, I already have a daughter-in-law. I might even have a grandson soon. Why would I get married?" Of course, more importantly, in Song Jining's mind, marriage was really not a necessity. She knew that she had feelings for Lu Yuan. Not only did she have feelings for him, but her feelings were getting deeper and deeper. She almost couldn't leave him. And Lu Yuan also loved her, so they should have a good relationship. When necessary, it was okay to live together. Lu Jin looked at Lu Yuan and saw that he was still looking at Song Jining with a doting expression. His stupid look of, "As long as you're good to me, I'm fine with anything," made him angry. He took out his phone with a sullen face and said angrily to Lu Yuan, "If you do this, don't blame me for doing it." As he spoke, he pulled up the video he had recorded earlier and walked to Song Jining's side. He extended his hand in front of her and said angrily, "There. Look for yourself. Director Song, you really have a heart of stone. What's wrong with our boss Lu? You don't want to marry him, you just want to play with his feelings and body." This was the first watch of the day, chapter 2065, together. Today is Monday, right? Recommendation votes are very important. I'm looking for recommendation votes in the third watch. At 1:30 p.m. on the second watch. At 8:30 p.m. on the third watch. Chapter 2077. Gun Yanji rubbed her forehead and almost sighed. She quickly stood up to pull Lu Jin away. Hua Xiaoheng also quickly stood up and pulled Lu Jin out with Gun Yanji. Only Song Jining and Lu Yuan were left in the dining room. Lu Yuan looked awkwardly at the backs of the few people leaving and sighed in his heart. Fortunately, he was also old and had seen a lot of the world. He had also cleaned up a lot of messes for Lu Jin, so he wasn't particularly embarrassed. He was just a little embarrassed and fidgeted in his seat. Several times he wanted to stand up and leave with Lu Jin and the others. When he finally stood up and was about to leave, Song Jining grabbed him. Lu Yuan didn't lower his head. He smiled and said, "Don't mind it. It was an emergency. I was just saying. Otherwise it's not like you don't know Lu Jin. He's stubborn." Song Jining had just finished watching the video, and her whole body was immersed in great shock and daze. At the bottom of the sea, on the plane, and in the bedroom, the feeling that had made her flustered came back. Her mind was in a mess just now, but her hand still subconsciously grabbed Lu Yuan and didn't let him leave with her. Lu Yuan's voice was faint, but it had a calming power. He was especially gentle and considerate to her. It's good that you're back safely now. I'm already very lucky to be my girlfriend. Song Jinning's hand tightened. She looked up at him seriously and said, I'm also a stubborn person. Lu Yuan's heart skipped a beat. He was suddenly afraid to listen to Song Jinning continue. What if she said that she and Lu Jin were a couple? Although he knew that the possibility was very small, people who were in the middle of it would always think more. Lu Yuan didn't dare to lower his head, much less look into Song Jinning's eyes. Song Jinning slowly stood up in front of Lu Yuan. She had a strange feeling in her heart. It was as if she had finally landed on something, but it was also as if she was drifting and just wanted to find a harbor to rest in. Marriage was indeed not a necessity for her, and she had never thought of it as a necessity. Although she looked young, she was actually quite old. Anyone with a 30-year-old son could no longer pretend to be a shy girl. Therefore, the decision to get married was very difficult for her. But after watching the video just now, she only had one thought: this man was worth marrying. Regardless of whether it was a rational analysis or an impulsive decision, she could not refuse. Song Jinning didn't know what to say. She stared at Lu Yuan for a while and suddenly realized that under his calm aura, the tips of his ears were actually slightly red. She couldn't help but laugh. Song Jinning separated her fingers and clasped his tightly. She said softly, "You've done so much for me." Lu Yuan closed his eyes and immediately interrupted her. "I've done so much just to save you. Don't feel burdened." In that situation, no matter who it was, I would have saved him. He didn't want to give Song Jinning the impression that he was trying to repay her kindness, and he didn't want Song Jinning to be with him out of pity. That was never what he wanted. Song Jinning sighed softly and said, "Lu Yuan, do you really think I'm that stupid to believe your words?" In the video just now, Lu Yuan had completely revealed his true feelings. In order to save her, he was willing to do anything and give up anything. Was this something he could do regardless of who? Once Song Jinning figured it out, she would stop thinking about it. Lu Yuan was slightly taken aback and couldn't help but quickly glance at Song Jinning. She looked at him with a smile. There was no pity, no sympathy, no reservation, and no arrogance in her gentle willowy eyes. There was only tenderness and determination. Song Jinning let go of his hand but hugged his waist. She looked up and said, "Does what you said just now still count?" Lu Yuan's heart skipped a beat. He quickly looked down at Song Jinning. "What did you say? Can you say it again?" "Why do you have to say it again?" "I'm afraid I heard wrong." Lu Yuan wrapped his arms around her waist and said seriously, "I'm afraid I've lost my mind and am hallucinating." Song Jinning wasn't a particularly emotional person, but Lu Yuan's words made her nose sting and she almost cried. "Jinning, I'll say it again. Marry me, be my wife, and let me take care of you for the rest of your life." Lu Yuan held her face and said carefully. As he spoke, he looked at her expression, afraid that she would object again and come up with some irrefutable logic. Song Jinning nodded. Her eyes were slightly wet as she said in a low voice, "Okay." Lu Yuan was stunned for a moment before he understood what Song Jinning meant. He was so happy that his entire body swelled up. He nodded repeatedly and said, "If you agree, we can even go and register tomorrow." As soon as he finished speaking, there was a burst of cheers outside the restaurant. Lu Jin walked in with a bottle of champagne. He opened the cap with a bang, and the bubbles of the champagne immediately sprayed out. She got some shiny paper scraps from somewhere and threw them at Song Jinning and Lu Yuan. She laughed and said, "Congratulations, congratulations. Congratulations on finally getting married and being together for 100 years. Lu Yuan looked at them in surprise and said, "I thought you guys had already gone far." Lu Jin looked at him righteously. "My phone is right here. It was broadcasted the whole time. There's nothing I can do." Lu Yuan, Hua Xiaoheng was the last to walk in. He calmly extended his hand to Lu Yuan and Song Jinning and said, "Congratulations, both of you." This was considered approval of Song Jinning's remarriage. Song Jinning smiled and said, "As soon as possible. I don't want to get married after my son." Hua Xiaoheng and Gu Nianji looked at each other and held each other's hands. Lu Jin began to come up with a bad idea. "Why don't we go and register tomorrow? Or register our marriage on Christmas Day?" Song Jinning pursed her lips and chuckled. "How can it be so fast? I have to file a report when I get married." Lu Yuan came back to his senses and lowered his head to touch her forehead. He said, "I have to file a report too. I almost forgot about it." "Okay, let's file a report together. When it's approved, we'll go and register." Song Jinning had the mind of a scientist, so she thought about the most critical parts. She didn't think about the ring for the proposal or the ceremony for the wedding at all. But Lu Yuan wouldn't forget. Seeing that the people closest to him were all here, he decided to get engaged. Lu Yuan quickly left the restaurant and returned to his room. He took out a 12-carat diamond ring that he had prepared long ago and walked to Song Jinning's side. He knelt down on one knee and said, "Jinning, are you willing to marry me? This is our engagement ring." Song Jinning smiled and reached out her hand. Her fingers were slender like jade. Lu Yuan treasured the ring that looked like a card and put it on her finger. It was actually just the right size. Although the diamond ring was big, it was simple and elegant, so it didn't stand out on Song Jinning's finger at all. Lu Jin and Gun Yanji were finally satisfied. Gun Yanji smiled and said, "That's more like it. Alright, you guys have to remember to file a report early. If anyone tries to stop you, tell me. I'll teach them a lesson." Lu Jin also said, "I'll just say it here. Whoever opposes will be unlucky. Let's see who dares." I don't dare, Gun Yanji said repeatedly. "Dad, that's enough." Hua Guanchen found out the next day that Song Jinning had filed a marriage report and sent it to the military. Song Jinning was a special scientist who was closely related to the military. He didn't know that Lu Yuan had also filed a marriage report, but Lu Yuan was originally from the secret front, so it was right that he didn't know about him. Hua Guanchen listened to the personal secretary's report, and his expression became uglier and uglier. "Say that again. Who filed a marriage report?" Director Song. Nonsense. Why would she file a marriage report at her age? Do you know who she's going to marry? Hua Guanchen stood up, picked up his hat and was about to go out. The personal secretary quickly said, "I heard it's a businessman named Lu Yuan." "What did you say?" Hua Guanchen's expression changed drastically, and even his voice became much hoarser. This was today's second update, Chapter 2066, Whoever opposes will be unlucky. It was time to send an update to Old Z's second, the leader of September Ascension. Today was Monday, right? Recommendation votes are very important. I'm looking for recommendation votes in the third session. It was 8:30 p.m. on the third update. Chapter 2078. Lu Yuan's identity and experience were top secret even in the highest organization of the Wuxia Empire's military. If Hua Guanchen wasn't Lu Yuan's younger brother, he wouldn't have known about this. Of course, his personal secretary wouldn't have known either. Lu Yuan was still in the 2-year period of being kept secret, so all they knew was that he was a businessman. Although Hua Guanchen was mentally prepared, he still couldn't accept the news. Is his name really Lu Yuan? Are you sure? Hua Guanchen almost grabbed his personal secretary's neck and asked. The personal secretary nodded. His name is indeed Lu Yuan. Chief, is this person not good? Why was his expression so scary? Hua Guanchen used all his self-control to calm himself down, but it was only on the surface. He slowly raised his hand and waved. Got it. You can leave. After the personal secretary left, he sat alone in the office for a long time. When it was time to get off work, he made a decision. After coming out of the office, he didn't go home directly. Instead, he got someone to drive to Song Jinning's apartment complex. He knew that Song Jinning had bought a house in this complex, but she had never been here before. The property management of the complex didn't let them in. Hua Guanchen didn't say anything and only glanced at his personal secretary. The personal secretary understood and took out his ID. He said, "Our chief is here to see Miss Song Jinning, who lives here. She's our chief's ex-wife." When the property management heard this, they didn't dare to stop them anymore. They quickly opened the fence and let Hua Guanchen's car in. They called Song Jinning's apartment and said, "Miss Song? Your ex-husband, Chief Hua, is here to see you." Song Jinning went to the Institute of High Energy Physics today to submit a marriage application. She and Lu Yuan had just confirmed their relationship yesterday, so it was still a little awkward today. She didn't want to go home for a while. However, Lu Yuan still went to the Institute of High Energy Physics to pick her up like before. She had thought that she would be embarrassed to see Lu Yuan, but when she saw him standing high in front of the car, next to the gate of the Institute of High Energy Physics, behind him was a wide road, and there were trees with fallen leaves, she actually calmed down. Not long after the two of them returned home, Song Jinning received a call from the property management. She was about to ask the property management not to let Hua Guanchen in, but the property management continued, "He's already in." Song Jinning was a little angry and said, "Don't let him in next time." Property management. The other party was the bureau chief and the ex-husband. The court did not issue a restraining order. How could a small property management company like him dare to? Song Jining was still fuming when the doorbell rang. She immediately knew that it was Huo Guanchen. All right, let's settle the score together. She walked over with a solemn expression and looked through the peephole. It was indeed Huo Guanchen. Lu Yuan and Lu Jin poked their heads out and asked, "Who is it? Are Nianji and Xiaoheng here?" Song Jining shook her head and said casually, "It was General Hua." Lu Yuan pursed his lips and immediately walked to Song Jining's side and asked, "Why is he here? Do you want me to send him away for you?" "There's no need for that. I was just about to settle the score with him." Song Jining opened the door in a fit of pique. Huo Guanchen frowned and looked up, just in time to see Song Jining and Lu Yuan standing in front of him like a perfect couple. His pupils suddenly contracted. Although he didn't want to admit it, he had to admit that his heart was deeply hurt by this scene. It was as if years of nightmares had finally come true. He almost wanted to pinch himself to see if he was dreaming or if it was a living reality. Song Jining said bluntly, "General Hua is here at the right time. I have something to settle with you." If a woman spoke in such a tone, it meant that she was looking for trouble. Huo Guanchen knew Song Jining very well, so his mood couldn't help but improve. She could still lose her temper at him, so it wasn't like she didn't have any feelings for him at all, right? He nodded and walked in. The guards and personal secretary didn't follow him in. Instead, they stood guard at the door. The chief was obviously here to deal with family matters, so they didn't want to go in. After Huo Guanchen came in, he quickly sized up the layout of the room. Just as he was about to speak, Lu Jin poked his head out of his room and asked, "Who is it? Are you here for dinner?" It was indeed time to get off work to cook dinner. Lu Yuan had just been in the kitchen discussing what to eat today with Lu Jin. Although Lu Jin didn't know how to cook, he was still very knowledgeable about what to eat. Huo Guanchen didn't mind Lu Jin's tone, but he was a little surprised to see that he was familiar with the place. He turned to look at Song Jining and said, "You're treating President Lu and Professor Lu to dinner today?" Song Jining smiled and said frankly, "They're the ones treating me to dinner, not the other way around. But this is your house. If they're treating you to dinner, shouldn't you go to their house or go out to a restaurant or a hotel?" Huo Guanchen felt even worse. He had to come to Song Jining's house to treat her to dinner. How thick-skinned was Lu Yuan? But they live here. Song Jining sat down as if nothing had happened. "Of course I have to treat them to dinner here." "What did you say?" Huo Guanchen felt like his high blood pressure was about to explode. He pointed at Lu Yuan and glared at Song Jining. "Why are they staying at your house? Don't they have their own place to live?" Huo Guanchen knew that Lu Yuan and Lu Jin lived in this neighborhood, and Gu Nianji had provided them with 2 houses. Why didn't they live in Gu Nianji's house but Song Jining's? No wonder he could coax someone like Song Jining into thinking about remarrying. It was really the case of, a strong woman is afraid of a pestering man. Song Jining raised an eyebrow. "Their house is being renovated, so they don't have a place to live. I have a big place and a lot of rooms here, so I'll let them stay for a few days." "What's wrong?" She crossed her arms and said unhappily, "Besides, what does this have to do with you, Chief Hua? I make the decisions about my room. Don't be too shameless." Huo Guanchen finally understood Lu Yuan's trickery. He was angry and regretful. He snapped, "What nonsense! You're a single, divorced woman. If others find out that you're letting 2 men live in your house, do you still want your reputation?" Without waiting for Song Jining to retort, he continued, "Even if you don't think about your own reputation, you have to think about Xiaoheng's. How old is he? If you still want to remarry, are you going to give him a younger brother or sister who's more than 30 years younger?" Song Jining hadn't thought about having children yet. When Huo Guanchen said this, her face darkened. She said coldly, "Even Xiaoheng isn't against it. Who do you think you are? You're also against me? How many times have I said it, Chief Hua? We're already divorced. If you continue to pester me like this, I'm going to apply to the court for a restraining order." Lu Yuan sat next to Song Jining and put his arm around her shoulder. He said to Huo Guanchen, "Chief Hua, if I remember correctly, you divorced Jining when she was seriously ill and established a relationship with Baijini. You even got engaged to her 2 years ago. If it weren't for Baijini's murder case, you would have married her according to normal procedures, wouldn't you? If you can remarry, why can't Jining?" Lu Yuan asked in return. Huo Guanchen suppressed his anger and took a deep breath. How could it be the same? I can remarry but she can't. This was today's 3rd update, chapter 2067, I can, she can't. Today was Monday, right? Recommendation votes are very important. I'm looking for recommendation votes in the 3rd session. Chapter 2079. She wanted to get rid of me so that she could be with you, the rich husband in her eyes. Song Jining glared at Huo Guanchen. Her beautiful willowy eyes were filled with anger. Do you know that I'm disgusting? She treats trash like a treasure and even wants to use me as an imaginary enemy. I'm about to throw up my dinner from last night. How can you look at me like that? Huo Guanchen felt as if someone had stabbed a poisonous thorn in his heart. His facial features were almost distorted. Be reasonable. In order to find the mastermind for the greater goal, can't you be a little aggrieved? No. Before Song Jining could speak, Lu Yuan had already spoken first. You have your own plan and you have no right to drag others into it. According to our disciplinary rules, you've already violated the rules. It's best if you write a self-reflection and explain the whole story to the organization. I hope the organization can be lenient. Lu Yuan hated Huo Guanchen's act of using Song Jining as a cover. You're really ruthless. Even I'm ashamed of my inferiority. When they were on a mission on the secret front, they never used innocent people as bait, nor would they let innocent people take the blame. He didn't expect Huo Guanchen to be so unscrupulous to achieve his goal. Lu Yuan's expression was extremely cold. He looked at Huo Guanchen indifferently, but it was as if there was a heavy weight pressing down on him, making him unable to breathe. Ever since he was young, this brother of his, who was unattainable in his heart, had made him angry and in pain, was a very special existence in his heart. However, Huo Guanchen hadn't been the director of the political department in the military for so many years for nothing. He quickly recovered and said with a normal expression, "In order to achieve great things, I don't care about trifles. I've already written a report to the organization. I didn't break any rules. Lu Yuan, you haven't been back for many years, so you might not know that many of our rules have changed. No matter how it changes, the purpose of our army cannot be changed. If it changes, our army will completely change," Lu Yuan said lightly and put his hands behind his back. S3. He looked really scary when he was serious. Song Jining thought quietly and rubbed the hand that had held Lu Yuan's hand behind her back. Her palm was sweaty just now. She didn't know if Lu Yuan noticed. You don't have to worry about that. Huo Guanchen planned to leave with his military cap in hand. He said coldly, I don't care how many boyfriends you have, but don't even think about remarrying. Stop right there. Song Jining was furious. You can't leave without making things clear. She hadn't expected Huo Guanchen to be so stubborn after all that she had said. Song Jining was fuming when Lu Jin walked out of the room with drooping eyelids and an unhappy expression on his face. He drawled, Why aren't you done yet? Are you trying to starve me to death? Song Jining was furious. Chief Huo doesn't allow me to remarry. There's no food for me today. Lu Jin perked up and rolled up his sleeves. What? If he doesn't allow you to remarry, I won't have food to eat? Who said that? Lu Yuan glanced at him indifferently. Jining's meaning is my meaning. Lu Jin had no choice but to glare at Lu Yuan. He knew that Lu Yuan was using him as a gun. Lu Yuan rarely revealed a pleading expression. There were some things that a person of his status couldn't do, so he could only ask Lu Jin for help. Lu Jin also understood this logic. Since Boss Lu was in trouble, as a brother he would definitely help him to the end and help him to the end. He turned to stare at Huo Guanchen and said to Song Jining, You won't get married just because he said so? Is there any law left? Believe me, Chief Huo really does what he says. Song Jining snorted. She still had some understanding of Huo Guanchen's abilities. Lu Yuan smiled bitterly at Lu Jin and said, Because Jining has worked with the military so many times in secret experiments, she's no longer a free scientist. All of her social relationships, including her future marriage, will be reviewed by the military's political department. If Chief Huo doesn't approve it, she really won't be able to marry me. Lu Jin thought for a moment and asked Song Jining, It's so troublesome. Do you still want to get married? Song Jining was actually very stubborn. Once she made up her mind, she wouldn't turn back. Song Jining held Lu Yuan's arm and said, Since I've decided to marry Lu Yuan, I have to get married no matter how difficult it is. S3, Huo Guanchen chuckled. You can try. He also reminded her, If you're not convinced, you can go to General Ji. Song Jining thought of Huo Xiaoheng and hesitated. She was no longer a young girl without any worries, but a mature woman and a mother at the same time. It would be too embarrassing for General Ji to go to him. Huo Guanchen was shameless, but she and Xiaoheng were. Song Jining frowned awkwardly. Lu Jin snorted and said disdainfully, It's not a big deal. Why are you so worried? How can I not be worried? Song Jining also smiled bitterly. Professor Lu, you don't know the power of the political review? Why don't I know? Lu Jin sneered and shook his head. Since he won't pass your political review, then get someone else to do it. Lu Jin stared at Huo Guanchen and said seriously, I think you've reached the end of your career as the director of the political department. Do you believe that I won't let you do the job of political review? Huo Guanchen's expression changed drastically. What do you want to do? Don't forget that your daughter, Nianji, is going to marry my son. She still wants to enter the Hua family after offending me? My daughter, Nianji, is going to marry Boss Lu's stepson in the future. Maybe she'll change her surname to Lu in the future. What does it have to do with you? Lu Jin was best at stabbing people in the heart. This time it was a fatal blow. Huo Guanchen, dead. This was the first update of the day, chapter 2068. If you don't get married, you won't be able to eat. There were 2 updates today. At 8:30 p.m. the second update. Chapter 2080. Although Huo Guanchen thought so, he knew that he couldn't say it out loud. He looked at Song Jining and changed the topic. His tone was especially sincere as he said, Ah Ning, I know you. When we were husband and wife, the most important thing in your heart was your research work, followed by our son Xiaoheng and then me. I completely understand and I have no complaints at all. Later we got divorced. You simply made the laboratory your home and devoted yourself to your work. I think that's very good. As Huo Guanchen spoke, he glanced at Lu Yuan, intentionally or unintentionally. Lu Yuan, on the other hand, was able to control himself. His expression was very calm and completely unmoved. Huo Guanchen sneered in his heart and continued, Ah Ning, now that you're divorced from me, you do have the freedom to date a new boyfriend. I won't stop you, but I'll help you check. Although you're extremely smart, you still have too little experience in relationships. Be careful not to be deceived by someone with ulterior motives. The corners of Song Jining's mouth twitched. Thank you, Chief Hua. Although I didn't have good taste and recognized the wrong person, I don't want to blame you because I have to bear most of the responsibility. So for Xiaoheng's sake, we'll forget about that debt. No matter how experienced Huo Guanchen was, he couldn't help but blush. He quickly glanced at Lu Yuan. Lu Yuan was still smiling gently and he couldn't tell how deep he was. Huo Guanchen felt even more depressed. He pursed his lips and didn't say anything. Song Jining continued, but other than that, Chief Hua, you owe me too much. Huo Guanchen was stunned. I owe you? When did I owe you? You don't owe me? Song Jining raised an eyebrow. You divorced me when I was seriously ill and had no self-consciousness. Then you left me in Bai Jini's hands and let her and Luo Jialan abuse me. How should we settle this debt? Huo Guanchen couldn't help taking a step back and said, I didn't know that Bai Jini and Luo Jialan would do this. If I really didn't want to care about you, I could just send you away after the divorce and let you fend for yourself. Don't you want to? But your mother doesn't agree. Song Jining snorted. If Nianji hadn't discovered my abnormality, I would have been dead by now. Chief Huo wouldn't have needed to worry about whether I would remarry. Lu Yuan's expression gradually turned solemn. He had heard these things from Hua Xiaoheng and Gu Nianji before, but he had never heard it from Song Jining herself. Huo Guanchen clenched his fists and suppressed his anger. I've been looking for a way to cure you, and I've been investigating the truth behind the failed experiment. You've seen it this time. My plan worked. The mastermind from 18 years ago has revealed himself again. Aning, don't you care at all? Song Jining held Lu Yuan's hand and looked at Huo Guanchen coldly. This is the third debt I want to settle with you. After a pause, Song Jining raised her head and choked back the sobs in her throat. If you want to find out the truth, it's fine if you use yourself as bait, but why did you lure Gua Huaining, that lunatic, to set everything on fire? Do you know why I almost lost my life this time? It's because she sees me as a thorn in her side and insists on getting rid of me so that she can be with you, her rich husband. Song Jining glared at Huo Guanchen. Her gentle, willowy eyes were filled with anger. Do you know that I'm disgusting? She treats trash like treasure and even wants to use me as an imaginary enemy. I'm about to throw up my dinner from last night. How can you look at me like that? Huo Guanchen felt as if someone had stabbed a poisonous thorn in his heart. His facial features were almost twisted. Be reasonable. In order to find the mastermind for the sake of a bigger goal, can't you suffer a little? No. Before Song Jining could speak, Lu Yuan had already spoken first. Your own plan has no right to drag others into it. According to our disciplinary rules, You've already violated the rules. It's best if you write a self-reflection and explain the whole story to the organization. I hope the organization can be lenient. Lu Yuan hated Huo Guanshan's act of using Song Jining as a cover. You're really ruthless. Even I'm ashamed of my inferiority. When they were on a mission on the secret front, they never used innocent people as bait, nor would they let innocent people take the blame. He didn't expect Huo Guanshan to be so unscrupulous to achieve his goal. Lu Yuan's expression was extremely cold. He looked at Huo Guanshan indifferently, but it was as if there was a heavy weight pressing down on him, making him unable to breathe. Ever since he was young, this brother of his, who was unattainable in his heart, had made him angry and in pain, was a very special existence in his heart. However, Huo Guanshan hadn't been the director of the political department in the military for so many years for nothing. He quickly recovered and said with a normal expression, "In order to achieve great things, I don't care about trifles. I've already written a report to the organization. I didn't break any rules. Lu Yuan, you haven't been back for many years, so you might not know that many of our rules have changed. No matter how it changes, the purpose of our army cannot be changed. If it changes, our army will completely change," Lu Yuan said lightly and put his hands behind his back. S3? He looked really scary when he was serious. Song Jining thought quietly and rubbed the hand that had held Lu Yuan's hand behind her back. Her palm was sweaty just now. She didn't know if Lu Yuan had noticed. You don't have to worry about that. Huo Guanshan planned to leave. He held his military cap in his hand and said coldly to Song Jining, "I don't care how many boyfriends you have, but don't even think about remarrying." Stop right there. Song Jining was furious. You can't leave until you've made yourself clear. She didn't expect Huo Guanshan to be so stubborn after talking for so long. Song Jining was furious when Lu Jin walked out of the room with drooping eyelids and an unhappy expression. He drawled, "Why aren't you done yet? Are you trying to starve me to death?" Song Jining was furious and said angrily, "Chief Huo doesn't allow me to remarry. There's no food to eat today." Lu Jin perked up and rolled up his sleeves. "What? If he doesn't allow you to remarry, I won't have food to eat." "Who said that?" Lu Yuan glanced at him indifferently. "Jinning's meaning is my meaning." Lu Jin had no choice but to glare at Lu Yuan. He knew that Lu Yuan was using him as a gun. Lu Yuan rarely showed a pleading expression. There were some things that a person of his status couldn't do, so he could only ask Lu Jin for help. Lu Jin also understood this logic. Since Boss Lu was in trouble, as a brother he would definitely help him to the end and help him to the end. He turned to stare at Huo Guanshan and said to Song Jining, "He said he won't let you get married, so you won't let you get married? Is there any law left?" "Believe me, Chief Huo really does what he says." Song Jining snorted. She still had some understanding of Huo Guanshan's abilities. Lu Yuan smiled bitterly at Lu Jin and said, "Because Jining has worked with the military so many times in secret experiments, she's no longer a free scientist. All of her social relationships, including her future marriage, will be reviewed by the military's political department. If Chief Huo doesn't approve it, she really won't be able to marry me." Lu Jin thought for a moment and asked Song Jining, "It's so troublesome. Do you still want to get married?" Song Jining was actually a very stubborn person. Once she made up her mind, she wouldn't turn back. Song Jining held Lu Yuan's arm and said, "Since I've decided to marry Lu Yuan, I have to get married no matter how difficult it is." S3? Huo Guanshan chuckled. "You can try." He even reminded her, "If you're not convinced, you can go to General Ji." Song Jining thought of Huo Xiaoheng and hesitated. She was no longer a young girl without any worries, but a mature woman and a mother at the same time. It would be too embarrassing for General Ji to go to him. Huo Guanshan was shameless, but she and Xiaoheng were. Song Jining frowned awkwardly. Lu Jin snorted and said disdainfully, "It's not a big deal. Why are you so worried?" "How can I not be worried?" Song Jining smiled bitterly. "Professor Lu, you don't know the power of the political review?" "Why don't I know?" Lu Jin sneered and shook his head. "Since he won't pass your background check, then get someone else to do it." Lu Jin stared at Huo Guanshan and said seriously, "I think you've reached the end of your career as the director of the political department. Do you believe that I'll make it impossible for you to do the political review?" Huo Guanshan's expression changed. "What do you want?" "Don't forget, your daughter Nianji is going to marry my son. After offending me, she still wants to enter the Huo family. My daughter Nianji is going to marry Boss Lu's stepson in the future. Maybe he'll change his surname to Lu. What does that have to do with you?" Lu Jin was best at stabbing people in the heart. This time the stab was fatal. Wu Guanchen was dead. This is today's first chapter. Chapter 2068, No Rice If You Don't Get Married. It's 2 o'clock today. At 8:30 p.m. the next night. Chapter 2081. You still want Xiaoheng to change his surname? Wu Guanchen's anger was all directed at Song Jining. He was no longer as calm as before. His hands were clenched into fists, and the veins on the back of his hands were bulging. It was obvious that he was extremely angry. Not only did you embarrass yourself, but you also want Xiaoheng to embarrass himself. His career will definitely be ruined by you. Changing his surname makes you so angry? Lu Jin looked at Wu Guanchen as if he was an idiot. You took me seriously? Do you think Xiaoheng will let others manipulate him? He doesn't even know what kind of person his son is, and he still wants to interfere with his ex-wife's freedom of marriage. His IQ is really worrying. This was another knife. Wu Guanchen felt like he had been killed twice today. His face was livid and his lips were trembling. He turned around and left in a huff. However, Lu Jin recklessly said loudly behind him, "General Hua, I'm not joking about the background check. Just you wait." Wu Guanchen thought to himself, I want to see how you can stop me from going through the background check. After Wu Guanchen left, Lu Yuan and Song Jining looked at Lu Jin without saying a word. Lu Jin had been very happy to talk big against Wu Guanchen just now, but now that the two of them were looking at him, he felt a little guilty. He shrunk his neck and chuckled. When is dinner? I'm so hungry that I can't speak. Lu Yuan knew his personality. He shook his head and went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. Song Jining looked at him hesitantly. She also wanted to beg him. Lu Jin had no choice but to use his brain. He scratched his head and said, I'll go take a look at your department's regulations and see if there's anything I can do. With that, he went back to his room and turned on his computer to search. He found a lot of information about the background check of marriage applications, as well as the relevant regulations, policies, and the department's workflow. He studied it carefully. There were simply too many regulations and almost all aspects were included. However, it was much simpler than the professional literature that Lu Jin had read before. He read almost 10 lines at a glance. He had a good memory and a strong understanding, so he quickly became an expert in the background check. By the time Lu Yuan finished cooking dinner and called him over to eat, he was already confident and felt that he was worthy of the meals Lu Yuan had cooked for him for so many years. Returning to the dining table and sitting down, Lu Jin smiled at Song Jining, who was obviously not in high spirits. Director Song, how could you be intimidated by that person? What do you mean by intimidate? Song Jining couldn't eat anymore, mostly because she was angry at Wu Guanchen. Why can he do it but I can't? What right does he have to block my marriage application? Lu Jin looked at Song Jining and asked her seriously, Director Song, is it because you were provoked by Wu Guanchen that you started having reverse psychology, or is it because you really want to marry Boss Lu? Song Jining looked at him in surprise and said, Why do you ask? Is there a logical relationship between the two? I want to marry him. I am willing to marry him. That is enough. No, this is not enough. Lu Jin was actually an experienced person. He could empathize with Lu Yuan's mentality just by thinking about his own mentality towards Qin Suwen. He looked at Song Jining with a serious expression. If you've just been provoked by Wu Guanchen to the point of rebelling and insist on marrying someone, then I have nothing to help you with. You can go and mess with Wu Guanchen yourself. If you cause a ruckus, maybe the two of you will rekindle your old feelings and get married again. What did you say? Song Jining was also angry. She thought to herself that Lu Jin's reputation as a patient with severe interpersonal disorder was not just for show. He was simply a human-shaped weapon of mass destruction that attacked indiscriminately. Lu Yuan couldn't bear to see this and said, Jining, don't be angry. Professor Lu's words are especially sharp when he's hungry. Just eat your fill. Lu Jin felt that something was wrong with these words. It was as if he was saying that he was a good-for-nothing. He glared at Lu Yuan and tapped the bowl with his chopsticks. I'm speaking up for you. Boss Lu, if you don't understand, then don't get involved. Lu Yuan didn't say anything. He thought to himself that since he knew so much, he would only be able to secretly love Qin Suwen for the rest of his life. But no matter what, Lu Yuan thought that Lu Jin could still have a biological daughter with Qin Suwen. Moreover, Nianji was so smart and cute, so he felt that his life had not been in vain. Lu Jin turned to Song Jining and asked, If you really like Boss Lu and want to marry Boss Lu, then I'll help you. Song Jining understood what he meant. She tilted her head and analyzed her thoughts. She nodded and said, although Huo Guanchen makes me very angry, I'm more afraid. I'm worried that I won't be able to marry Lu Yuan because of him. She turned to look at Lu Yuan, who was sitting beside her, and held his hand. She said with a smile, I sincerely want to be your wife. I don't know if I'll be lucky enough to do so. Lu Yuan's heart was filled with excitement. He didn't care about Lu Jin's presence. He turned around and hugged her. He said hoarsely, it doesn't matter if we don't get married as long as we're together. At that moment he really felt that it was fine not to get married. However, Lu Jin was unhappy. He drawled out his voice and said angrily, it's fine if you guys don't get married now. Then why did you guys go through all that trouble before? Are you guys messing with me? Lu Yuan said sincerely, I'm not messing with you. I just don't want to give you too many problems. You have enough on your own. You're so amazing, so you should focus your energy on scientific research. You shouldn't worry about trivial family matters like us. Tiske. Lu Jin snorted. You make it sound like I can't do scientific research just because I'm meddling in other people's business. Does that have anything to do with anything? He pointed at his nose. I have so much IQ that I have nowhere to put it. Let me tell you. It's not bad to occasionally compete with people like Huo Guanchen in terms of wits and courage, and it can also increase my literacy in the humanities. Don't think that people who study science can't understand those official documents. I'm going to use my scientific thinking to analyze the official documents and teach him a lesson in minutes. Judging from his tone, it seemed like he had really found something amazing. Lu Yuan and Song Jining looked at each other and said in unison, I'd like to hear more. Lu Jin smiled. He wanted to keep her in suspense, but he remembered that it was really not easy for the two of them. They had been separated for 18 years, but they were still together in the end. He would help them achieve their dreams. It could be considered as accumulating merit for his girl. He looked at Lu Yuan and said first, when you become my girl's father-in-law, remember to treat my girl better. You can't just protect Hua Xiaoheng when something happens. Of course. Song Jining was surprised. I've always felt sorry for Nianji. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about him. Lu Jin stared at Lu Yuan and asked persistently. Lu Yuan nodded slowly. I love Nianji very much too. Now, for your sake, I treat her as my own daughter. That's more like it. Lu Jin nodded in satisfaction. He trusted Boss Lu's character. Every word that Boss Lu spoke was worth 1,000 taels of gold. Lu Jin took out the summary of the information he had just done and said, look, these are the terms of marriage in your country. It's not a lot, but there are hundreds of pages of rules and regulations. Lu Yuan, Song Jining, the corners of their mouths twitched, but they didn't say anything to interrupt Lu Jin. Lu Jin continued, I've read so much and found a problem. Actually, the political review of marriage also has to avoid arousing suspicion. Asking related parties to avoid arousing suspicion was suggested by the applicant. We will ignore it if we don't sue. Lu Yuan smiled when he said, avoid arousing suspicion, because he already understood what Lu Jin meant. Song Jining didn't know as much about this as Lu Yuan. She asked curiously, what do you mean avoid arousing suspicion? You mean Huo Guanchen? Yes. Lu Jin pointed at a hidden clause that he had painstakingly found and said, you and Huo Guanchen are divorced. Originally you weren't related, but because you have a common son, Hua Xiaoheng, and he holds a high position from this point of view, Huo Guanchen is inseparable from you. He's a special related person. If you mention avoid arousing suspicion, he won't be able to interfere with your marriage review. We can apply for someone else to do the review. Huo Guanchen should avoid arousing suspicion. She added, this clause is very hidden and very few people have used it. It falls under the category of ignore arousing suspicion. At this point, Lu Jin said cunningly, then we can remind the person who will take over the political review in advance not to be affected by Huo Guanchen. If he rejects your application because of this, we will file an administrative lawsuit and let the court decide if he colluded with Huo Guanchen to seek personal gain. Lu Yuan smiled and nodded. That's the principle. Even if the court can't convict him, the career of a person who goes to the administrative court will end. The person who can take over Huo Guanchen's political review shouldn't ruin his career just to cater to Huo Guanchen's selfishness. The reason why they dared to do this was because they didn't break any rules. They were firm without desires. That works? I've learned. Lu Jin cupped his hands. He really didn't know that people who went to the administrative court could no longer be promoted. They might even lose their original positions, even if the court ruled that there was no responsibility. This was a tacit move that could not be found in any of the laws and regulations. Therefore it was reasonable that Lu Jin didn't know. But it was enough for Lu Yuan to understand. He smiled at Lu Jin and picked up his chopsticks. "Let's eat." Huo Guanxin rushed home angrily. He didn't eat dinner and didn't sleep for almost the entire night. The next day he went to his office and personally found Song Jinning's marriage application. He read it word by word. In his position he actually wouldn't personally manage trivial matters like marriage applications and political review, but if he wanted to, he could still manage it. This was the power of a county official being inferior to a local official. He pursed his lips and read the entire application without saying a word. Just as he was about to give his approval, a colleague of the same rank knocked on the door and said with a smile, "General Hua, Director Song has applied for an associated person to avoid suspicion. Her marriage application is now being taken over by me." This was the second update of the day, Chapter 2069, Too Much IQ to Put It Anywhere. There were 2 updates today. Remind everyone of the recommendation votes and monthly votes. Chapter 2082. Huo Guanxin didn't come back to his senses for a long time. He stared blankly at his colleague. After a while, he tilted his head and asked, "What did you say? Did I hear you correctly?" The man smiled and walked up to Huo Xiaoheng slowly. He picked up the marriage application from Huo Xiaoheng's desk and repeated, "General Hua, you heard me right. Director Song has applied for an associated person to avoid suspicion. Her marriage application is now being taken over by me." He flipped through it casually and made sure that there were no missing pages in the application. Huo Guanxin didn't have time to comment on it, so he breathed a sigh of relief. He put the application into his briefcase, nodded at Huo Guanxin and turned to leave. Huo Guanxin came back to his senses and grabbed his hand. He said in a low voice, "Wait, what's going on? What associated person to avoid suspicion? Why haven't I heard of it before?" The man smiled and said, "General Hua, even I, who has been reviewing marriage applications all year round, have never heard of it. But my secretary checked the information and found that there was indeed such a clause. However, it was very secretive and there were many conditions and restrictions." As he spoke, he pushed Huo Guanxin's hand away without leaving a trace. He patted his briefcase and said, "Actually, most of the people who can come to us for a political review won't involve an associated person to avoid suspicion. This time, Director Song is the most special of the special." Huo Guanxin's face turned cold and he said in a low voice, "Where did this come from? Director Song and I divorced many years ago. How could there be an associated person? Could it be that he quoted the wrong clause?" "I don't think so." The man shrugged and said frankly, "I've seen it. Director Song wrote it very clearly on the application. It's mainly because your son, Major General Hua, is too powerful. His rank determines that even if you two get divorced, you'll still be permanently associated. So, you have to avoid suspicion when it comes to anything related to her. Similarly, Director Song has to avoid suspicion when it comes to anything related to you." Huo Guanxin's heart turned cold when he heard this. He knew very well that it must have been Lu Jin's doing for such a hidden clause to be dug out and used on him. Yesterday, Lu Jin had said that he wanted to change people for a political review. So this was how it was to change people. In order to avoid suspicion he had to change people. And Song Jinning probably couldn't wait to avoid arousing suspicion, right? Song Jinning wouldn't even bat an eyelid when it came to anything related to him. Huo Guanxin's heart was filled with bitterness and bitterness. He was practically paralyzed in his seat. His expression was stiff and he didn't even move his eyes. The man chuckled and finally left with his briefcase. Huo Guanxin narrowed his eyes as he watched the man leave. After the man walked away, Huo Guanxin's personal secretary walked over and whispered, "Chief, why don't you ask him to do you a favor?" This was not a major event that concerned the national economy and the people's livelihood, so it was understandable for him to make things convenient for them. However, Huo Guanxin shook his head with a dark look in his eyes. Song Jinning had chosen this person to take over Song Jinning's marriage application after careful consideration. This was because this person was 10 years younger than Huo Guanxin. Although he was now a lieutenant general, he already held the same position as Huo Guanxin. In time, this person would become his most powerful opponent. Since there was such a competitive relationship, it was obvious that even if this person was willing to do Huo Guanxin a favor, Huo Guanxin would never beg him. Because the moment he opened his mouth, he would be giving the other party a huge leverage. Wouldn't he have to obediently give up his position in the future? Huo Guanchen would never do that no matter what, even if it was for Song Jining. Huo Guanchen knew him so well and the entire department structure. Huo Guanchen subconsciously felt that this must have been his big brother's doing. Lu Jin had found the terms and Lu Yuan had chosen the replacement person. What a pair of brothers in hardship. Huo Guanchen sneered and threw his pen away. He stood up abruptly and said with a livid face, "How's the interrogation going over there? I want to take a look for myself." His personal secretary quickly said, "Kevin's side is more troublesome. His family in the United States seems to have hired a very powerful lawyer for him. He's expected to arrive in the capital after the new year. Kevin said that he won't say a word until his lawyer arrives." Huo Guanchen suddenly looked at his personal secretary. "If he doesn't say anything, you won't ask? Since when did you guys only have such tricks up your sleeves?" Huo Guanchen's personal secretary smiled bitterly and lowered his head. "To tell you the truth, his company, Carlyle International Investment Company Limited, is spreading the news that their foreign employee has disappeared for no reason. They're contacting the media to publicize Kevin's whereabouts and give them an explanation. They're quite arrogant." Huo Guanchen vented all his anger on Kevin and his group. He thought about it. If it weren't for Kevin and his group, why would he have deliberately misled Guo Huaining? If it weren't for them, he and Song Jining wouldn't have reached such an irreversible state today. He put on his military cap and angrily went to watch the interrogation. After the examiner was changed, Song Jining's marriage application was approved in only half a day. Lu Yuan was even faster. He directly took it to General Ji to sign and seal it. He didn't accept any refutation at all. When General Ji saw that the person he was applying for marriage was Song Jining, he was stunned speechless for a long time. Lu Yuan waited for a while but didn't get a response from General Ji. He simply stuffed the pen into General Ji's hand, held his hand and asked him to sign it. Then he stamped General Ji's seal. When the procedures were completed, General Ji came back to his senses and scolded him jokingly, Lu Yuan, you're already so old, yet you're still doing such a thing." Lu Yuan smiled. "General Ji, I have no choice. I've already missed it for more than 30 years. I can't continue to make mistakes." When General Ji heard that there was a story here, he wished he could hand Lu Yuan a microphone and let him tell his story. Of course, Lu Yuan ignored General Ji's bad taste. He calmly took the marriage application that had been signed and stamped. After going to the organization department to register, he returned to Song Jining's apartment. Song Jining hadn't returned yet, so Lu Jin was the only one in his room tinkering with his weather weapon control system. Lu Yuan came to his door and knocked on it. He said with a smile, "Professor Lu, how's the preparation for your personal laboratory?" "Soon," Lu Jin said without turning his head. "Where's your marriage application? Has it been approved?" "It's been approved." Lu Yuan raised the application document, and the paper rattled. Lu Jin smiled and raised his hand to snap it. "Awesome, boss Lu. Let's get ready for our wedding night." Lu Yuan. He knew that nothing good would come out of a dog's mouth. But when he turned around and left, the corners of his lips couldn't help but curl up. The night of our wedding night. That must be a very beautiful night. This was the first update of the day, Chapter 2070, Pretty Arrogant. There were 2 updates today. At 8:30 p.m. the next day. P.S. It's the end of the month. Hurry up and vote for it. Chapter 2083. In the afternoon, Song Jining's marriage application was approved and sent back to Song Jining's office at the Institute of High Energy Physics. She was so happy that she excitedly took the marriage application and spun around the empty office several times. She even struck a few classic ballet poses. When she came out of the office, a smile was on her face, and her eyes were astonishingly bright. She was already beautiful even in white and plain clothes. Now that she was in a good mood, her beauty radiated from the inside out as if it was glowing. Everyone who saw her would be firmly attracted to her, and their eyes would not be able to see anything else. It was a long time after she left that everyone could wake up from their days and start gossiping. Did Director Song have some good news? I was stunned just now. How can someone be so beautiful? This is no longer so beautiful that she has no friends. She's so beautiful that you forget to breathe. Good Lord Longdi Dong. I know how those incapable emperors felt back then, who didn't hesitate to set fire to the vassals for the sake of a beauty's smile. Right? We just don't have the right to be the emperor. If I really became the emperor, I would definitely be an incapable emperor for the sake of Director Song's smile. On this day, Everyone in the Institute of High Energy Physics who saw Song Jining expressed that Director Song's beauty had gone up another level. Although everyone knew her age, seeing that she was so young, someone had once secretly spread rumors that Song Jining had undergone plastic surgery. However, her appearance, figure, and even expression were too natural. There were no signs of plastic surgery at all. She was completely different from those plastic surgery faces that would collapse in 2 or 3 years. After today, everyone realized that she was beautiful. This kind of beauty had nothing to do with age. Back at her apartment, Song Jining saw Lu Yuan sitting in the living room reading a magazine as soon as she entered. Hearing the sound of someone coming in, Lu Yuan raised his head. When he saw Song Jining's bright and dazzling smile, Lu Yuan felt like he had forgotten to breathe for a moment. After a while he stood up and his voice was even lower. "You're back. Why are you back so early today? Aren't you waiting for me to pick you up?" Song Jining waved her marriage application at him and said with a smile, "My application was approved. I didn't expect it to be so fast. I brought it back for you to see. I didn't believe it was true." "That's really fast." Lu Yuan smiled reservedly. He stood up and walked to Song Jining's side. He helped her take off her coat and hung it on the coat hook at the entrance. As he did so, he held her hand and glanced at the application report. At a glance, the signatures, comments, and official seals were all present. It was a valid document. This kind of application report was usually made in triplicate. After the approval, the applicant, the person who approved the report, and the organization's reference room would keep one copy. The application report in Song Jining's hand belonged to the applicant. "Then let's go register," Song Jining said with sparkling eyes. Her eyes were so bright that Lu Yuan nodded as if he had been bewitched. "Okay." After saying that, she felt that it was inappropriate and added, "Let's register first, then we'll prepare for the wedding." Song Jining smiled and said, "Yes, but it doesn't have to be too big. We just need to have a meal with our close relatives and friends." She didn't want a wedding that was too big. Firstly, they were of different ages and their state of mind was different as well. Besides, her and Huo Guanshan's wedding had been very grand back then. There had been 1,000 tables and thousands of guests. So what? In the end it still ended tragically. Lu Yuan understood her intentions. Moreover, he didn't attend Song Jining and Huo Guanshan's wedding back then. At that time he just happened to be out on a mission. Only he knew that it wasn't just happened, but that he did it on purpose because he didn't want to see his sweetheart get married. When he went home to face reality, it was after Song Jining and Huo Guanshan's son, Wuxia, was born. At that time he was out on a mission. Because he was absent-minded, he was almost shot to death. It was his comrade who protected him and sacrificed his life for him. That comrade's fiancée was Luo Xinxue, who was already pregnant at that time. In that era, if a woman got pregnant before marriage, she would really be ridiculed by others until she committed suicide. He had been entrusted by his comrade to take care of Luo Xinxue in her next life. In addition, his parents and the organization hoped that he could get married and have children as soon as possible and settle down, which would also help his future career. Back then he wasn't young anymore, but in this life he had never planned to let any other woman be his wife other than Song Jining. Although he had registered his marriage with Luo Xinxue, it wasn't a real marriage. From beginning to end, he hadn't even touched Luo Xinxue's finger. The two of them had agreed that he would protect her, and she would have a proper name to give birth to a child. After they got married, he brought her to the Huo family, and she gave birth to his comrade's posthumous daughter, Luo Jialan. Then came the big explosion of the failed experiment, which changed his life, Song Jining and Luo Xinxue's lives, and even Luo Jialan's life. Lu Yuan looked at Song Jining, and bits and pieces of what had happened over the years flashed through his mind. He held her in his arms and said, "Let's go register now." He turned around and called out to Lu Jin, "Professor Lu, do you want to be a witness to our marriage registration?" Lu Jin's room was silent for a moment, then there was a crackling sound. Lu Yuan and Song Jining were both puzzled. They were about to walk over to take a look when Lu Jin had already rushed out of the room. He rubbed one of his knees and said, "What did you say? Boss Lu, are you crazy about getting married?" Song Jining laughed. This news was quite surprising. But it was really better to go today than to pick the day. There were still a few hours before the marriage registration office closed anyway. Lu Yuan asked Lu Jin, "Do you want to be a witness? If not, I'll find someone else." "Of course," Lu Jin shouted. "I also have to call my girl and Xiaoheng. In addition to a witness, you also have to have a witness. Otherwise, the marriage registration would be incomplete." Lu Yuan nodded. Then call Nianji and Xiaoheng. Song Jining looked at her watch and hesitated. Nianji and Xiaoheng are at work right now. Is that okay? What's wrong with that? Lu Jin glared at her. Today is the day of Boss Lu's marriage registration. Those two have to come even if they skip work. Lu Yuan smiled and teased, your official documents are really good. You even know about the full attendance award. Lu Jin rolled his eyes. In your eyes, I'm a good-for-nothing and a scientific idiot, right? How would I dare? Lu Yuan bowed slightly in a graceful manner. His demeanor made Song Jining's heart skip a few beats. She couldn't help tiptoeing and kissed Lu Yuan on the cheek. She smiled and said, Why do I like you so much? Lu Jin covered his eyes and screamed, I'm blind, I'm blind. Miss Song, you're showing off your love, I'm telling you. This was today's second update, Chapter 2071, Showing Off Your Love, I'm Showing Off My Love. There were 2 updates today. P.S. It's the end of the month. Hurry up and vote for it. Chapter 2084. Lu Jin was too exaggerated. Lu Yuan shook his head helplessly at Song Jining and said, Ignore him. Great Professor Lu is good at insulting people, so he definitely won't speak nicely. What did I say wrong? As Lu Jin sent a message to Gu Nianji, he said unhappily, Your show of love blinded me and you still say you didn't show off lasers. It wasn't even time to get off work in the afternoon, so Gu Nianji was in her office writing a work plan for next year. Hearing the sound of a text message coming in, she glanced at her phone. When he saw it, he stood up abruptly and packed his LV commuter bag in a flurry. At the same time he replied with a voice message, I'll go right away. Where is the marriage registration office? Lu Jin turned on the voice. Lu Yuan and Song Jining heard it. The two of them smiled awkwardly. Song Jining said to Lu Jin, It's in the Civil Affairs Bureau near the Institute of High Energy Physics. This was the place that the two of them had discussed when they submitted the marriage report. Lu Jin quickly sent the address to Gu Nianji and forwarded it to Hua Xiaoheng. Hua Xiaoheng had just finished his meeting and walked out of the conference room. He was talking and laughing with Yin Shixiang and Zhao Liangzi. The Special Operations Forces had gotten involved in Kevin's case, but they were investigating it overseas. From the looks of it, they had found a lot of interesting things. Today's meeting was to summarize the results of the current stage of the case and start writing a report for reference by the relevant domestic agencies. He was in a good mood. When he returned to his office, he saw that his personal phone on his desk was vibrating, and several text messages popped up. He picked it up and opened it. His mind instantly went blank. Although he really hoped that his mother and uncle could be happy, when the day really came, he found that his mood was very subtle. Of course he wouldn't object, but his uncle would become a stepfather. He shouldn't think too much about it. Hua Xiaoheng's expression remained calm as he replied, I'll be there soon. He picked up the car keys and said to Yin Shixiang and Zhao Liangzi, I have something to do so I'll be leaving now. If there's nothing else you can get off work early. Yin Shixiang laughed. Hua Xiao, are you going to spend Christmas with Nianji too? Hua Xiaoheng froze. Christmas? I never celebrate foreign festivals. Oh right. Yin Shixiang scratched his head in embarrassment. But it's Christmas Eve today. Chi-Chi asked me to pick her up early. Seeing Hua Xiaoheng's expression change, Yin Shixiang hurriedly said, We're not going to celebrate Christmas. But Christmas? I'll tell Chi-Chi that we're going out for dinner. He chuckled and ran out like a wisp of smoke. Zhao Liangzi shook his head with a smile and tried to smooth things over. Mr. Hua, Big Xiong just likes to have a party. He didn't mean anything else. He won't celebrate foreign festivals. No one in the military knew about foreign festivals. Although there were no written rules, everyone had a tacit understanding. Even if someone wanted it, they would only secretly celebrate it with their close friends and family. No one would say it out loud. Hua Xiaoheng didn't hate foreign festivals, he just wasn't interested. However, when he recalled that Christmas, he had flown overnight from Sea City to the imperial capital to pick up Gu Nianji, who had been sitting alone at the train station in the middle of the night. He still felt a surge of warmth in his heart. It was at that time that Gu Nianji saw Song Jining, who had lost her mind. 2 years had passed, and not only had Song Jining completely recovered, but she was also getting married again. He hoped that this time the two of them could truly be happy together. The subtle emotions in Hua Xiaoheng's heart finally dissipated. He didn't ask for a driver and drove himself to the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau near the Institute of High Energy Physics. Parking the car by the side of the road, he realized he was actually early. Taking out his phone to check, he discovered that not only was Gu Nianji not here, but the two newlyweds weren't here either. Of course, the wedding witness, Professor Liu, was nowhere to be seen. He got out of the car and leaned against the door to smoke a cigarette. Recently, one incident after another occurred. Even the failed experiment from 18 years ago was finally picked up by the military from the dusty pile of old papers and reopened the investigation. Although this was a domestic matter, the appearance of Kevin, a Chinese-American citizen, meant that the related enemy might be colluding with external forces. Therefore, Hua Xiaoheng's Special Operations Forces were justifiably involved. He had already stayed up for a few nights without sleep. His eyes weren't very bloodshot, but the corners of his eyes were a bit red. His eyes moved slightly and he looked very charming. He wore a dark green military jacket that complemented his handsome and masculine face. It was practically a uniform seduction. Gu Nianji personally drove the car from the Senate to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Because she was anxious, she changed the gears along the way and turned a normal SUV into a Formula car. When she screeched to a stop in front of the Civil Affairs Bureau and opened the door, she saw Hua Xiaoheng standing quietly in front of her. "You exceeded the speed limit again?" Gu Nianji shrunk her neck guiltily and got out of the car with a smile. Hugging Hua Xiaoheng's arm, she said, "I didn't. I drove at a normal speed in places where there was a speed detector." "Then where there was no speed detector?" Hua Xiaoheng looked down at her and said dryly, "Are you playing word games with me?" Gu Nianji was most afraid of Hua Xiaoheng speaking to her like this. She blinked and tears immediately welled up in her black, glassy eyes. Hua Xiaoheng patted her head. "Today is a good day for President Liu and Mrs. Song to register their marriage. Don't offend them. Otherwise, President Liu won't cook for you in the future." Gu Nianji turned her head and immediately wiped away her tears. "Then don't be so mean to me. I'm just driving. Don't worry about my skills." "It's not that I'm worried, but it's always wrong to exceed the speed limit. You're already the chief legal advisor of the Senate. Your every move is being watched." Hua Xiaoheng held her hand and walked side by side with her to the Civil Affairs Bureau. "Don't think that you can only slow down at the speed detector. Just you wait." Gu Nianji really didn't think that much. She looked at Hua Xiaoheng in surprise and said, "No way? There are people watching me 24 hours a day?" "It's not 24 hours, but there are definitely people watching you 8 hours a day. You're a public figure now, so you should be aware of this and be prepared to be watched at all times." Hua Xiaoheng said calmly, "It's not just you. All the members of the Senate are the same. Countless people want to catch them by their tails so that they can pull them down in the next election." Gu Nianji pouted. "I'm not from an election background. As long as Speaker Long doesn't mind, I'm not afraid of anyone." However, even though she said that, she still kept an eye out and planned to pay attention to whether there were any comments about her on the internet. When she and Hua Xiaoheng walked into the Civil Affairs Bureau side by side, she didn't notice that someone had just gotten out of a car. When he saw her and Hua Xiaoheng walking into the Civil Affairs Bureau side by side, the person's face instantly contorted. "I can't believe she's really going to marry Major General Hua." Why? This was the first update of the day, Chapter 2072, Watching and Being Watched. There were 2 updates today. 8:30 p.m. the next update. P.S. It's the end of the month. Vote quickly. Chapter 2085. The woman muttering to herself wasn't very old. She was elegantly dressed and beautiful, but now her face was twisted with madness. It looked a little horrifying. The monstrous anger almost made the woman lose control of her emotions. She almost pounced on Gu Nianji, but the person behind her stopped her in time. "Miss, this has nothing to do with you. Let's hurry up and pick up Miss." The assistant beside her wasn't a young person, but a middle-aged woman in her 40s, so she was much calmer. The woman took a deep breath. She still had a lot to do, so she would let Gu Nianji run wild for a while. She finally calmed down and walked to a residential area near the Civil Affairs Bureau. Although the location was good, the residential buildings were commercial buildings from the early days of the imperial capital. They looked very old now. There was no property management, and the residential buildings looked dirty and old. The residential buildings were about 8 stories high and didn't have elevators. The lighting in the corridors wasn't good, and it was very dark during the day. She took her assistant up to the 8th floor and stood in front of an old-fashioned security door that looked like an iron railing. She rang the doorbell. Not long after, a haggard woman with turbid eyes opened the security door. She looked at the 2 people in front of the door in confusion and asked, Who are you looking for? The young woman became excited and stepped forward to reach out to the gap in the security door. She held the hand of the haggard woman behind the door, tears streaming down her face. Sister, it's me. I'm here to take you home. Gu Nianji and Hua Xiaoheng didn't know about such a coincidence at all. But even if they knew, they probably wouldn't take it to heart. They'd deal with it when it came. If one came, they'd catch one. If two came, they'd catch both. They couldn't seal themselves off and completely cut off contact with the outside world just because they were worried about these bastards. Or would they have countless people protect and monitor them all the time just to guard against that tiny possibility? No, not only was Gu Nianji unwilling, but Hua Xiaoheng was also unwilling. He protected Gu Nianji so that she could live among the crowd like ordinary people. And excessive protection was actually a form of losing personal freedom. The two walked side by side into the marriage registration office of the Civil Affairs Bureau. Gu Nianji couldn't help glancing at Hua Xiaoheng. Her fingernails dug into his palm and she said softly, "You didn't even bring me here to register." At that time, when the two of them had registered their marriage, it had been done in secret at the Special Operations Forces headquarters. Because of the series of conspiracies, Gu Nianji suffered a huge blow. She hated Hua Xiaoheng's behavior and decided to break up with him. However, whether it was for business or personal reasons, Hua Xiaoheng would never break up with her. He made a prompt decision and almost forced her to marry him. However, their marital status was a top secret, and only a few people knew that they were married. The whole world's memory stopped at the grand engagement ceremony of the two in Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin even said that he would attend their wedding. Hua Xiaoheng's heart skipped a beat when he thought about this. He couldn't care less about the fact that everyone in the hall was staring at him. He bent over to cup Gu Nianji's face and kissed her on the lips. Fortunately, they were in the hall of the marriage registration office. Everyone was there to get married, and most of them were couples who were deeply in love. Hua Xiaoheng kissed the woman next to him passionately from time to time, so it didn't seem out of place. However, this pair was so beautiful and pleasing to the eye that someone couldn't help but take out their phone to take a picture. However, before the phone could be aimed at Hua Xiaoheng and Gu Nianji, someone suddenly walked over from the side and reached out to stop it. He said kindly, "You're not allowed to take pictures here. If you want to take pictures, please go outside." "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." The person quickly put the phone away. Not long after, another couple walked into the hall. The man was handsome and the woman was, wow. No one knew how to describe this woman. She looked to be in her early 30s, the most mature, beautiful and attractive age of a woman's life. Compared to when she was in her teens and 20s, she was more mature, as if she had seen through the world. However, compared to women in their 40s and 50s, she was less worldly. She had the delicate beauty of a young girl, but also the charm of a mature woman. Coupled with her beautiful facial features and elegant temperament, she was so beautiful that one would lose their soul and lose their mind at a glance. She was so beautiful, moreover, because the difference between this kind of beauty was too great, people couldn't be jealous. Just looking at it made them feel that it was beautiful. Although the man beside her looked gentle and harmless, the aura he exuded made people not dare to get within 3 feet of him. This person was undoubtedly someone who had been in a high position for many years. The two of them walked into the hall of the marriage registration office, and the entire hall suddenly fell silent. It was like a lid had been placed on a boiling pot of oil, and the sizzling sound instantly disappeared. Gu Nianji and Hua Xiaoheng looked over and saw that it was indeed Song Jining and Lu Yuan. The two of them quickly went up to greet them. Gu Nianji cupped her hands and smiled. "Congratulations." Hua Xiaoheng nodded and said calmly, "Congratulations." Lu Yuan smiled and patted Gu Nianji's head. "Thank you, Nianji. By the way, your father will be here soon. Let's wait for him for a while." Hua Xiaoheng pulled Gu Nianji to his side and smiled faintly at Lu Yuan. "Congratulations, President Lu." Lu Yuan smiled and didn't say anything else. Song Jining was a little nervous. She stood beside Lu Yuan, her hands unconsciously twisted together. Lu Yuan looked at her gently and pried her hands apart. He held one of her hands in his broad and warm palm and squeezed it. Song Jining's heart gradually calmed down. After the two of them took their numbers, they sat down in the hall. Before their numbers could be called, Lu Jin rushed in. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and said with a smile, "I'm sorry I'm late. I couldn't help but modify the automatic driving program control software along the way." Gu Nianji understood and smiled. "It seems like it's almost time to get off work. The car conditions on the road are more complicated, right?" Yes, only complicated car conditions can give me the inspiration to modify the automatic driving control program. People like Lu Jin had so much IQ that they had nowhere to put it. Not letting him think was worse than killing him. Song Jining and Lu Jin eagerly chatted about professional topics. Although Lu Yuan didn't understand, he still listened with interest. Gu Nianji looked down at her phone. The corners of Hua Xiaoheng's lips curled up. Not long after, Song Jining and Lu Yuan's numbers were called. The two of them hurriedly stood up. They had felt calm just a moment ago, but now they were nervous. Song Jining's expression was a little serious. She straightened Lu Yuan's collar and patted him on the shoulder. Lu Yuan smiled and smoothed Song Jining's hair. He bent down and kissed her on the cheek. The people in the hall who were staring at the two of them immediately cheered and applauded warmly. Looking at such a perfect couple and a young couple registering for marriage, for some reason even the onlookers were a little touched. Looking at the two of them, they couldn't help but believe that there was still love in this world that would last forever. The love hidden in the bottom of their hearts could not be erased by time, nor could it be invaded by time. And the highest treatment that could be given to each other in a relationship between a man and a woman was to marry you. This was today's second update, Chapter 2073, I Believe in Love Again. There were 2 updates today. P.S. It's the end of the month. Hurry up and vote for the monthly votes. Chapter 2086. Lu Yuan held Song Jining's hand and walked towards the marriage registration window. For the first time, Lu Jin didn't say anything that spoiled the mood. He watched silently, his gaze distant. It was as if through the backs of the two of them he could see a scene that he had fantasized about countless times in his dreams. When Qin Suwen and He Qingjin got married, they had the grandest wedding of that era. At that time Lu Jin was the same as now. He sat in the crowd and watched the goddess in his heart hold another man's arm as she walked to the priest and promised to live for the rest of her life. He couldn't remember what he was feeling at that time. He might have been sad, pained, or jealous, but it wasn't serious. He wasn't sad, pained, or jealous to the point of being twisted. There was just a faint sadness. He didn't know when he would be able to let it go. But as time passed, he faced himself calmly and knew that he would never be able to let it go for the rest of his life. Therefore, when Qin Yaoguang crazily handed over a fertilized egg to him for gene editing, saying that it came from her and his egg cells and sperm, he also crazily followed suit. He had already determined that the egg cells in the fertilized egg were provided by Qin Suwen, but he pretended not to know and made Qin Yaoguang believe that he hadn't discovered the truth from the beginning to the end. With great enthusiasm, he performed the most perfect gene editing on this hard-won fertilized egg, and because he was full of love, his gene editing was overdone. Not only did he not miss the target at all, but he also had an idea. He used the DNA fragment of the small fertilized egg to replicate it, removing the ancient virus genes that didn't belong to humans, thus creating a perfect gene that was unique on both sides of the world. Just like an artist, his love for Qin Suwen was the inspiration and muse in his work. It allowed him to see the light on many problems, and his technical and theoretical level had been greatly improved. Of course, the most important thing was that he and the woman he loved had a child that he loved with his entire life. That was his greatest gain, second to none. Lu Jin had always known that he was irrational, so even though he had a crush on Qin Suwen for so many years, he had never wanted to die. All his love was hidden in his heart, just like Lu Yuan's love for Song Jining. He thought that this was why he had tried so hard to bring Lu Yuan and Song Jining together, right? Because letting Lu Yuan and Song Jining be happy was like letting his best friend obtain the happiness that he couldn't obtain. However, Lu Jin later realized that although he was rational when it came to relationships between men and women, he was not rational at all when it came to father-daughter relationships. He gave all his sensitivity, protectiveness, and favoritism to his daughter, Gu Nianji. Perhaps it was because of guilt, or perhaps it was because she had been an angelic baby since she was young. In short, this child had unknowingly occupied his entire body and mind. He loved her more than life itself. Moreover, it was a completely selfless and unrequited love. Lu Jin's eyes turned slightly to look at Gu Nianji, who was sitting next to him. Gu Nianji stared intently at Lu Yuan and Song Jining's backs in front of her. Her eyes were like water and her eyebrows were beautiful. From time to time she would raise her head and say something to Hua Xiaoheng. Hua Xiaoheng leaned sideways to listen, his expression calm and composed. He only smiled faintly when he looked at her. Lu Jin's father was a psychologist and he had done some research on psychology. Just by looking at Hua Xiaoheng's expression and posture, Lu Jin knew that he loved Nianji deeply. When he thought about how he had once risked his life to go to the other world to look for Nianji, what more could he ask for from such a son-in-law? Although he still didn't like him. Lu Jin thought about it and rolled his eyes in Hua Xiaoheng's direction. Hua Xiaoheng noticed it from the corner of his eye, but he ignored it and continued to look ahead with a smile. Lu Yuan and Song Jining had already arrived at the marriage registration window. They sat in front of the staff and took out their IDs and marriage registration photos and handed them over. The staff had long noticed this very compatible couple. She smiled and nodded. Congratulations to the two of you. Then she began to register Lu Yuan and Song Jining's personal information. The staff was quite calm when she registered Lu Yuan's age, name and place of origin. When it came to registering Song Jining's age, name and place of origin, the staff thought she had seen wrongly. She wiped her eyes hard and leaned closer to the computer screen to take a closer look. After a long time, she turned to look at Song Jining and asked in surprise. You had plastic surgery? Song Jining, Lu Yuan frowned. What do you mean? Does it have anything to do with you? It was rare for Lu Yuan to be so sarcastic, but if she said bad things about Song Jining in front of him, he would definitely fall out with her. That's not what I meant. The staff quickly waved her hand and stared at Song Jining carefully for a while. She said, You probably didn't have plastic surgery. I can't see any traces of it even when I'm so close to you. Besides, if plastic surgery can really make you look like this, I'll do it too. Lu Yuan was about to flare up again when Song Jining gently pressed his hand down from the stage. She smiled at the staff and said, I'm just good at taking care of myself. Other than doing experiments every day, I sleep. I don't have to worry about anything, so I naturally don't look old. Really? Can you take care of yourself just by sleeping? The female staff member's eyes lit up. Don't you eat bird's nest and wolfberry for beauty? Song Jining was about to shake her head when Lu Yuan interrupted. She often eats a bowl of rose milk bird's nest for breakfast in the morning. Staff, Song Jining cursed silently. How could she eat it every day? And she usually ate it as a midnight snack at night. However, even though she complained, Song Jining wouldn't say it out loud and embarrass Lu Yuan. The staff member chatted for a while and finally entered all the data. Then she took out 2 small red marriage certificates. Both their names were on them and there was also a photo of the two of them. Standing in front of the white background, Song Jining smiled faintly. Her dark eyes were shining like stars, and her face was so beautiful that it looked like she had just come down from a beauty pageant stage. However, she was only wearing a simple white silk shirt with a small lapel that faintly revealed her perfect collarbone. It was as if she was wearing a gorgeous dress. Because Lu Yuan was in a very good mood, the smile on his face came from the bottom of his heart. It was completely different from the smile he usually wore on his face. It was a warm and emotional smile. Only those who saw Lu Yuan like this knew how formal his smile was, like a mask. His smile was genuine and his entire person was even more handsome. The female staff member didn't dare to look at Lu Yuan at all. When she looked at Song Jining, she only felt amazed. But when she looked at Lu Yuan, she felt that he was like a magnet that could suck her heart out. The female staff member resisted the unusual thumping of her heart and said, Where are your witnesses and witnesses? Lu Yuan turned around and gestured to where Lu Jin, Gu Nianji, and Hua Xiaoheng were sitting. Lu Jin, Gu Nianji, and Hua Xiaoheng immediately came to the window. Lu Jin adjusted the small bow tie around his neck and coughed. I'm the witness, Lu Jin. I'm the brother of the groom, Lu Yuan. Only then did everyone realize that Lu Jin was actually wearing a formal tuxedo. The small bow tie around his neck made his plain face look more elegant and scholarly. He could almost be considered good-looking. Lu Yuan was a little touched. He knew that Lu Jin hated formal clothes. When he was in the other world, he rarely wore formal clothes. But in this world, it was really hard for him to wear such a formal suit just for his marriage registration. Gu Nianji and Hua Xiaoheng looked at each other and said in unison, We're witnesses. The female staff member finally saw Gu Nianji and Hua Xiaoheng clearly and realized that she was dazzled. The number of beautiful and handsome men she had seen today was more than she had seen in the past year. In terms of beauty, she had never seen such a beautiful and handsome man in her entire life. Even the tall and thin witness next to her looked much more pleasing to the eye. Lu Jin had specially worn a pair of plain, gold-rimmed glasses for the tuxedo. He adjusted the glasses in the middle of his nose and asked, Mr. Lu Yuan, are you really willing to marry Miss Song Jining regardless of poverty, wealth, sickness, or health? I am willing, Lu Yuan said as he lowered his head and kissed Song Jining's cheek. Lu Jin waited for him to finish kissing her with a smile, then asked Song Jining, Miss Song Jining, are you really willing to marry Mr. Lu Yuan regardless of poverty, wealth, sickness, or health? I am willing, Song Jining said as she tiptoed and kissed Lu Yuan's cheek. Lu Yuan excitedly took out the ring and was about to put it on Song Jining. Lu Jin anxiously snatched it away and said, I haven't said you'll put a ring on the bride. Lu Yuan retorted without hesitation, you didn't say I could kiss the bride, but I did. What he meant was, who cared if you said it or not? Lu Jin glared at him and wished he could threaten him. Did he still want to get married? However, he held back when the words were on the tip of his tongue. He changed his words and said perfunctorily, then the groom can put a ring on the bride. He then turned around and left. Lu Yuan couldn't care less about Lu Jin now. He quickly exchanged rings with Song Jining and hurriedly took the stamped marriage certificate from the staff member. After signing it, they were officially married. He held the little red book in his arms and let out a long sigh. Jining, you've finally married me. This was the first update of the day, Chapter 2074, Reason and Gratitude. There were 2 updates today. 8:30 p.m. the next day. P.S. It's the end of the month. Hurry up and vote for it. Thank you to the leader of Enigma Yangxi for the 10,000 Chidian coins yesterday. Chapter 2087. Song Jining was also very touched. She gripped the little red book tightly with both hands and moved her lips, but found that her throat was choked. She would cry the moment she opened her mouth, so she could only purse her lips and smile to suppress the tears. This wasn't her first marriage, but it felt completely different. When she first married He Guanchen, she was still young and full of energy. At the same time, she was also uncertain about her marriage life, so she was really nervous. Now that she was married to Lu Yuan, her mood was extremely stable. She was like a traveler who had traveled thousands of mountains and rivers and finally arrived at her destination. She felt like she had returned home. She held Lu Yuan's hand. Lu Yuan wanted to kiss her again, but seeing that everyone in the marriage registration office was looking over, he had no choice but to give up. He smiled and said, let's go back. Do you want to go out for dinner to celebrate today, or do you want to eat at home? Of course at home. Without waiting for Song Jining to answer, Gunyanji said first. Hua Xiaoheng glanced at her. Gunyanji explained guiltily, marriage is nothing else. It's warmer and happier to celebrate at home, isn't it, Miss Song? Song Jining smiled and nodded. Just as I thought. I just want to eat President Lu's cooking at home. Lu Yuan said gently, okay, let's go back and eat. He looked around but didn't see Lu Jin. He asked, Nianji, where's your father? He went out first. Gu Nianji took out her phone and looked at the location. He's right outside. Lu Yuan led Song Jining out first, followed by Hua Xiaoheng and Gu Nianji. Lu Jin was indeed waiting at the door. Seeing them come out, Lu Jin put his hands in his trouser pockets and walked over leisurely. He said to Gu Nianji, Nianji, boss Lu is married. They're going on a honeymoon. It wouldn't be good for me to be a third wheel at their house. Gu Nianji quickly said, your house is still under renovation. Why don't you stay at Major General Hua's official residence? She just wanted to live with her father. Lu Jin raised an eyebrow at Hua Xiaoheng. Hua Xiaoheng smiled and said, no problem. We'll always have a room for Uncle Lu at home. Lu Jin was happy and said, I have a lot of things. Help me move them over. Hua Xiaoheng nodded. No problem. He took out his phone and called his driver, Fan Jian, to ask him to find someone to help him move. Lu Yuan didn't stop him. He only reminded Hua Xiaoheng, Professor Lu's security work must be done well. Can he enter and leave your place freely? I'll have the relevant departments handle the paperwork for Uncle Lu, Hua Xiaoheng said coolly. They walked down the steps of the marriage registration office and headed for the gate of the Civil Affairs Bureau. Lu Jin, Gu Nianji, and Hua Xiaoheng all drove over by themselves. The 3 of them walked to their car. Hua Xiaoheng opened the door and bent down to take out 2 large bags of beautifully packaged wedding candies. He gave one to Song Jining and said, Miss Song, take this to the Institute of High Energy Physics tomorrow. He handed the other bag to Gu Nianji and said, take this to the Senate and share it with everyone, especially Speaker Long. Lu Jin craned his neck and looked at it for a long time. Seeing that he didn't have a share, he couldn't help but reach out and say, what about me? Hua Xiaoheng was already prepared. He slowly took out a bag of higher-grade wedding candy from his pocket and placed it in Lu Jin's hand. He said, Uncle Lu is a great hero. Thank you. Lu Jin beamed and patted Hua Xiaoheng on the shoulder. You're a wise man. You're really a wise man. Lu Yuan was extremely touched. He was in a hurry to get his marriage certificate with Song Jining. He, who had always been a smooth talker, had actually forgotten to buy wedding candies for his own wedding. He quickly said, Xiaoheng, thank you for today. You're more thoughtful than me. Xiaoheng smiled. Actually, he hadn't expected that he would personally give out wedding candies for his mother's wedding. However, seeing that Song Jining was so happy that she couldn't close her mouth, he felt that it was worth it. Xiaoheng glanced at Lu Yuan and said with a smile, these are just wedding candies for close relatives. When President Lu and Ms. Song officially get married, President Lu can prepare more wedding candies. Lu Yuan was about to speak when Song Jining suddenly said, we're not going to have a wedding. Today is good, isn't it, President Lu? She stared at Lu Yuan, a little nervous. Although Lu Yuan was surprised, he didn't refuse. He smiled and said, as you wish. Whatever you say. That's what I said. Marriage is a matter between two people. Why do you have to invite so many irrelevant people? Song Jining was quite sharp-tongued. Lu Jin was unhappy when he heard this. He frowned and said, what about my girl's wedding? I don't care how many people get married. When my girl gets married, I want to announce it to the world. Xiaoheng, Gu Nianji wanted to facepalm again. She even wanted to announce it to the world. Did she think she was an emperor? She wasn't a princess either. Gu Nianji was about to smooth things over when Song Jining quickly said, that's for sure. Nianji and Xiaoheng's wedding must be grand. There will be 1,000 tables, not one less table. Lu Yuan, Lu Jin was puzzled. Didn't you just say that marriage is a matter between two people? Why do you have to invite so many irrelevant people? Song Jining said righteously, I'm saying that a second marriage is a matter between two people. It's your girl Nianji's first marriage, so of course we have to invite as many people as possible. But it's Boss Lu's first marriage, Lu Jin corrected her. No, it's not President Lu's first marriage, it's also his second. Song Jining argued with him seriously. I also have a daughter, so I'm even with him. Lu Jin wanted to say that Boss Lu's first marriage didn't count, but looking at Lu Yuan's expression, he shut up. Lu Yuan actually didn't want to hold a big wedding. As long as he could marry Song Jining, he would be satisfied with a wife. Not to mention that his identity had to be kept a secret. Just his relationship with Huo Guanchen's brother was too awkward, so it was better to keep it as simple as it was now. However, he would give Song Jining everything that needed to be given, so he wouldn't let her feel wronged. Lu Yuan coughed and interrupted the two scientists who were discussing first marriage and second marriage. He said, Jining and I will go back to my villa in the West Mountains today. We will go on a honeymoon in the future, but the specific destination will be kept a secret. Lu Jin was satisfied and said, we should be together. He looked at Song Jining and said, Boss Lu has waited for you for so many years. Don't let him down again. Song Jining blushed slightly, but she still nodded cautiously. I know. Professor Lu, don't worry. We'll definitely have a good time. Lu Jin was relieved. He looked at Song Jining with his hands behind his back, then at Lu Yuan. After a while he said, then can I still go to your house for dinner? After eating Lu Yuan's cooking for so many years, he was already used to it. Lu Yuan quickly said, I've prepared a room for you at my villa in the West Mountains as well as a laboratory. You can come and stay anytime. Lu Jin was overjoyed. His eyes lit up like the headlights of a car. Really? When did you prepare it? We don't even know. Lu Yuan thought to himself, what's so strange about you not knowing a lot of the things I've done? He smiled and held Song Jining's hand as he walked to his car. He said, but don't go for the time being. Stay at Xiaoheng's place. His cooking isn't bad either. Gu Nianji quickly pulled Lu Jin's arm and persuaded him, Dad, you should stay with us. Major General Huo's cooking is really delicious. Recently, his skills have improved greatly, and he's already on par with President Lu. Is it really that good? Then I have to try it. Lu Jin quickly nodded and said to Huo Xiaoheng, I'll send you the menu of my favorite foods later. You just have to follow it every day. Gu Nianji, Huo Xiaoheng nodded nonchalantly. Okay. After the small talk, everyone got into their cars and went to Lu Yuan's villa in the West Mountains for dinner to celebrate Lu Yuan and Song Jining's marriage. Huo Xiaoheng turned to the military headquarters compound midway and returned to the Huo family's mansion. Huo Guanchen had just finished dinner and was sitting on the sofa reading a magazine. Huo Guanchen was delighted to see Huo Xiaoheng come in. He stood up and before he could say anything, Hua Xiaoheng slowly placed a bag of wedding candy on the coffee table in front of him. He said, President Liu and Miss Song just registered their marriage. Please have some wedding candy. This was the second update of the day, chapter 2075, Everything is Enough with a Wife. There were 2 updates today. P.S. It's the end of the month. Hurry up and vote for the monthly votes. Although the ranking wasn't good, he couldn't give up. Chapter 2088. Hua Guanchen blinked and didn't react for a long time. He looked at the wedding candy Hua Xiaoheng put down in confusion. Who did you say got married? Who else could it be? Of course it's President Liu Miss Song. Hua Xiaoheng casually put his hands in his trouser pockets. His expression was calm and natural, as if he was saying, the sky is going to rain and the mother is going to get married. He looked down indifferently. I'm just telling you. Also, where's your gift? I'll bring it to you. Hua Xiaoheng's voice wasn't loud, but in Hua Guanchen's ears, it was like a clap of thunder. He stared at Hua Xiaoheng, his eyes widening and his face growing redder. He could even hear the sound of his own heartbeat, his blood pressure rising, and his eardrums almost popping out. In the end, he couldn't control himself anymore. He strode forward and grabbed the collar of Hua Xiaoheng's military jacket. What the F***ck are you talking about? Do you want to die? Hua Xiaoheng smiled slightly and held Hua Guanchen's hand tightly with his right hand. Slowly but firmly, he pushed his hand away and said, Chief Hua, why do you have to do this? If you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place? How dare you mock me? Hua Guanchen gritted his teeth and tried to grab Hua Xiaoheng for questioning. Hua Xiaoheng took a step back and put his hands behind his back. He said calmly, Chief Hua, you can't beat me if we fight. The orderly from the Hua family's mansion saw that the situation was not good. He stood up with his gun on his back and said, Chief, please calm down. Let's talk this out. Get out. Hua Guanchen didn't even look at them and asked them to leave. The orderlies glanced at each other. They didn't dare to disobey their chief's orders, so they lowered their heads and left. However, they still kept their ears open to listen to the sounds in the room, thinking that if the 2 inside really started fighting, they would rush in immediately even if it meant disobeying orders. Hua Guanchen took a deep breath and growled at Hua Xiaoheng, Get in here. He turned around and walked to his study. The security measures there were stricter, and they didn't have to worry about being overheard. Hua Xiaoheng thought about it and decided to follow her. When he arrived at Hua Guanchen's study, he didn't sit behind the desk. Instead, he stood in front of it. Seeing Hua Xiaoheng saunter in, he was enraged and swung his arm at him in an attempt to slap him. Hua Xiaoheng held Hua Guanchen down with just one hand and easily pushed him to the edge of the desk. He said calmly, Don't hit me. I'm not hitting you because I respect my elders, not because I'm afraid of you. Hua Guanchen's heart. What Hua Guanchen was. He clutched his chest and leaned against the desk, his whole body slipping under the desk. Hua Xiaoheng looked at him for a while. When he saw that his face was gradually turning green, he walked to the other side of the desk and took out Hua Guanchen's special medicine for him to take. Hua Guanchen sat on the sofa with his eyes closed. After a while he gradually recovered. He placed one hand on his chest and slumped on the sofa. He didn't even want to open his eyes. His voice was heavily nasal as he asked in a low voice, Your mother really married Liu Yuan? Why would I lie to you about this? Hua Xiaoheng sat down in front of him and asked, I'm just here to tell you in case you hear about this from someone else and lose your composure in public. Then should I praise you for being filial? Hua Guanchen sneered. Do you hate me that much? You don't want me to get back together with your mother? Don't tell me. Hua Xiaoheng looked at him calmly. From the moment you divorced Mrs. Song when she was seriously ill, you lost the right to get back together with her. I said, if you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place? If Miss Song had not recovered from her serious illness, you and Bai Jini would have already held your wedding. To be honest, I don't really believe that you're acting like you're in so much pain, Hua Xiaoheng said nonchalantly as he crossed his legs. I was so mad at her and I lost my mind. Hua Guanchen opened his eyes and felt his blood pressure rise again. This has nothing to do with me. Hua Xiaoheng stood up. Seeing that Hua Guanchen's condition had stabilized, he planned to leave and said, I've conveyed the message. I thought you would prepare some congratulatory gifts, but it seems like I was overthinking. Hua Guanchen sneered. You want me to bless those too? Dream on. How much better do you think Liu Yuan treats her than me? If your mother is still seriously ill? If my mother is still seriously ill, President Lu will marry her without hesitation and take care of her for the rest of her life. Hua Xiaoheng looked down at Hua Guanchen, whose face was flushed red. If you don't cherish it, no one will wait for you in the same place forever. With that he turned around and left. Hua Guanchen roared at his back. You unfilial son. I don't have a son like you. He actually watched his mother marry someone else and didn't stop her. Hua Guanchen was almost venting his anger on him. Hua Xiaoheng couldn't be bothered with him and left without looking back. He drove to the West Mountain Villa far away. When he got out of the car, the sky was already dark. It was Christmas Eve, and the West Mountain villas were decorated with Christmas lights. They shone with a colorful light in the mountains and forests. He stood in front of the car and silently watched the night view for a while. Lu Yuan's villa was located in a good location. It was located in an open and flat area halfway up the mountain, but it was surrounded by dense forests. There was a sense of tranquility that was isolated from the world, but there was also a sense of freedom that looked down on the world of mortals. Standing from Hua Xiaoheng's position, he could see the lights of the villa at the foot of the mountain. Occasionally he could hear the cheerful sound of Christmas music. It was a family that was holding a Christmas dinner. The thick smell of the world was intoxicating. Hua Xiaoheng narrowed his eyes and suddenly felt as if someone was looking at him from behind. He suddenly turned around and saw Gu Nianji standing under a big tree in front of the villa with her hands clasped together and her mouth breathing. She wasn't wearing much and she was wearing a red and white Christmas hat on her head. Seeing Hua Xiaoheng turn around, she waved at him with a smile and didn't say anything. Her bright eyes flickered under the silver street lights as if she was guiding him home. Hua Xiaoheng felt a surge of warmth in his heart. He quickly walked over and held Gu Nianji's hand in his broad and warm palm. He said calmly, "Why are you standing here? Why aren't you going in?" "I've been waiting for you." Gu Nianji smiled as she snuggled into his arms. Listening to his steady heartbeat, Gu Nianji felt very secure and rested her head on his woolen military coat. "You saw me get out of the car?" Hua Xiaoheng looked down and asked her, "Didn't you wait for more than 10 minutes? "It's more than that." Gu Nianji said aggrievedly, "You didn't come, so I could only wait." "Look, I'm almost frozen." Hua Xiaoheng kissed her cold fingers, unbuttoned his woolen military coat, and pulled her into his warm embrace. "Okay, let's go in. How's the dinner preparation going?" "President Lu and Miss Song are being intimate in the kitchen. I don't know when we'll be able to eat their wedding banquet tonight." Gu Nianji laughed. "My dad couldn't take it anymore, so he went to his room to fiddle with his program. I came out to wait for you." The relationship between Lu Yuan and Song Jining was really poisonous. It was as if it was contagious. Gu Nianji felt that she suddenly lacked love. She really wanted to be with Hua Xiaoheng and feel the pure love between a man and a woman. Hua Xiaoheng understood what she meant and wasn't in a hurry to go in. He turned around and hugged her from behind. He looked at the lights at the foot of the mountain and said softly, "This used to be my grandmother Xie Xian's property. It was supposed to be given to President Lu." Then wasn't grandmother very sad?" Gu Nianji held Hua Xiaoheng's hand. "At that time, everyone thought that President Lu had died in that failed experiment, right?" Hua Xiaoheng nodded. "Yes, so she changed her will and left this property to me." Gu Nianji understood and said, "Now that President Lu is back, you're returning it to him, right?" Hua Xiaoheng grunted and suddenly smiled. "You don't blame me, do you?" "Why would I blame you?" Gu Nianji asked curiously. "What did you do to let me down?" Hua Xiaoheng said, "I returned the portion of the inheritance that originally belonged to President Lu to him." Gu Nianji smiled. "I know. Legally speaking, that inheritance is yours. After all, grandmother has already changed her will. Even if President Lu comes back now, he won't be able to get this inheritance unless grandmother can come back to life and change her will." "Yes." Hua Xiaoheng nodded again. "But I still feel that since he's fine, these things aren't mine. It's time to return them to their rightful owners." Gu Nianji was silent for a moment before saying, "Don't be sad. I'll make a lot of money to support you." Hua Xiaoheng. This was today's first update, Chapter 2076, I'll make a lot of money to support you. There were 2 updates today. 8:30 p.m. the next night. P.S. It's a new month, the last month of 2018. Hurry up and vote for the minimum monthly ticket. Chapter 2089. You think I don't have money? Hua Xiaoheng was both angry and amused. He bent his index finger and tapped Gu Nianji on the forehead. Grandmother left most of her inheritance to me. Even if I returned President Lu's portion to him, it wouldn't even be 1/10 of what I inherited. Gunyanji was extremely surprised. Grandmother was so good to you? Hua Xiaoheng was silent for a while before saying, Grandmother brought me up from a young age, so our relationship was different. But if she hadn't found out about grandfather and head nurse Zhang, she wouldn't have done this. Gunyanji breathed a sigh of relief. I also said that if there was no will, your grandfather, father, and President Lu would be the first in line of succession. The second in line of succession would be your grandmother's siblings, grandparents, and maternal grandparents. Although President Lu wasn't around at the time, he still had his wife, Luo Xinxue, and daughter, Hua Jialan. So even if there was a will, it wouldn't make sense to leave 90% of the property to a grandson. To be honest, if your grandfather and father wanted to sue, they could even go to court to invalidate the will. Hua Xiaoheng raised an eyebrow. Can it be invalidated in black and white? Of course. Gunyanji shrugged. If the time of the will change was close to the time of your grandmother's death, then it would be even more plausible. For example, they could claim that your grandmother was delirious on her deathbed and was bewitched to change the will, so the will couldn't be established. It's all possible. Your grandmother has passed away anyway. It's not completely impossible for them to succeed if they want to do it. But now that you've taken the initiative to give a portion of the inheritance to President Lu, and there are special reasons, even if they go to court to fight, I'll be there. Don't worry. Gunyanji smiled slyly and patted Hua Xiaoheng on the shoulder. Hua Xiaoheng held her mischievous hand and smiled faintly as he lowered his eyes. Yes, what am I worried about? Even if the will is invalidated and I have no money, don't I still have you to earn money to support me? I'm counting on you. He said it so seriously that Gunyanji almost believed him. The two of them walked into the villa, and Gunyanji asked casually, but I didn't expect President Lu to accept your gift. Hua Xiaoheng laughed. President Lu didn't want it at first. He said he didn't lack money because grandmother still left some things for Luo Xinxue and Luo Jialan. Now these things belong to him. Since this estate was left to me by my grandmother, it's mine. But I said that at the time of my grandmother's death, she wanted to find his bones and bury him in France with her. He didn't object anymore. These were Xie Xian's last words in her life. They made Lu Yuan burst into tears. In the end, he still accepted Hua Xiaoheng's gift. It was Gunyanji's first time at Lu Yuan's West Mountain Villa. The villa was a European-style building complex. It was 3 stories high and there was a basement facing the backyard lawn, so it had a total of 4 stories. The night was very dark, and they could only see the shape of the small building by the LED lights on the surrounding white walls. Gunyanji watched for a while and suddenly said, Young master, he also has a villa nearby. He opened the door nonchalantly and led Gunyanji inside. When are you going to sell that house? Are you afraid of not having a place to stay? Why should I sell it? Gunyanji looked at Hua Xiaoheng strangely. You know better than me how difficult it is to buy a house here. What's the point of keeping it if you don't sell it? Do you still want Hijichu to come over? Hua Xiaoheng looked at Gunyanji intently and closed the door without batting an eyelid. There was no more energy in that world, so it was impossible for Hijichu to come over on his own. However, Gunyanji remembered the 2 strands of Hijichu's hair she had taken when she left. She planned to take them out after Song Jinning's honeymoon and let her mark them. Of course, there was no need to tell Hua Xiaoheng about this. She could arrange it herself. Gunyanji narrowed her eyes and smiled. No, I just thought that place isn't far from here, so I'll let my dad live there. Doesn't he like President Lu's cooking? But President Lu is married, so it's not realistic for him to live with the couple, so can we arrange it this way? This way they can take care of each other, but it's not as awkward as living in the same house. Hua Xiaoheng felt that it made sense and nodded. That's not bad. However, Uncle Lu might want to live with us. Would you find it inconvenient? Of course not. Gunyanji's eyes widened. I couldn't ask for more, but my dad might not be able to stand the atmosphere and environment of the Special Operations Forces, so I have to prepare a few more residences for him. Lu Jin actually didn't lack money, but he couldn't be bothered to take care of his finances. For him, having a place to sleep and eat and then having a laboratory was enough. Okay, then we'll go and transfer the ownership tomorrow. You can give the house to Uncle Lu. Hua Xiaoheng made a prompt decision and finally let Gunyanji get rid of Hijichu's villa. Gunyanji didn't realize it and was still feeling happy. It was also Christmas Eve. In this world, Gunyanji, Hua Xiaoheng, Lu Jin, Lu Yuan, and Song Jinning sat at the long dining table in the dining room. Each of them had a sumptuous meal in front of them and they ate happily. In the West Mountain Villa, which was almost in the same place in the other world, a Christmas party was also being held. They were waiting for the bell to ring after 12 o'clock, and everyone was singing hymns together. Xie Qingying was now He Zhichu's fiancée, and she was the hostess of tonight's dinner party. She wore a dark purple fishtail dress that wrapped around her curvy body. She looked dignified and seductive. She held a sparkling crystal glass in her hand. It was filled with red wine from the Bordeaux Chateau in France. She smiled at the guests who came and went. "Miss Xie, when are you getting married to young Master He? Don't forget to give us an invitation then." This was a friend of Xie Qingying's, so he spoke politely and appropriately. "That's right, Miss Xie. Young Master He has been living in seclusion recently. Why don't you get married and have children at home?" This was a family member who had a conflict of interest with He Zhichu, so of course his words were unpleasant. Xie Qingying was unhappy. No matter how useless young Master He was still better than a good-for-nothing like you. Besides, she loved He Zhichu not because of his family background. The Xie family was no worse than the He family. Even if He Zhichu came from an ordinary family, she would not hesitate to be with him as long as he loved her. And if He Zhichu came from an ordinary family, her pursuit would not have been so tortuous. Xie Qingying pursed her lips and smiled. She swirled the red wine glass in her hand and said softly, "You're so concerned about young Master He. Are you worried that something might happen to your family?" The man's expression changed. He said angrily, "What nonsense are you talking about? Don't think that you're amazing just because you're engaged to young Master He. You're not married yet. Besides, you can still get a divorce if you're married. Don't think too highly of yourself." Xie Qingying only replied with a hee-hee. However, she was also uneasy. He Zhichu had not been living in seclusion recently, but he had been elusive. She, his fiancée, had not seen him many times these days. Tonight's Christmas party was actually held at the last minute. It had only been prepared for less than 5 days. It would take at least a month for people of their class to prepare the guest list and send out the invitations. Xie Qingying had a vague feeling that He Zhichu was doing something, but she could not find out what he was doing. He had said that he would attend the Christmas dinner tonight, but he was nowhere to be seen. Worried about He Zhichu, Xie Qingying was a little absent-minded. Her best friend walked over and asked softly, "How are you and young Master He? Has he had some problems with his work recently?" There was more than a problem. Almost all the upper echelons of the imperial capital knew that ever since He Qingjian's sudden death and the fact that his death had been deliberately revealed, his prestige had been greatly affected. The people who wanted to replace him were colluding everywhere to pull He Zhichu down and not allow him to be the heir. Xie Qingying was very worried about He Zhichu. She had said several times that she would go abroad with him. But how could He Zhichu give up the foundation that his grandfather and father had built? At that moment, he was dressed in military uniform and personally led the guards who were loyal to him. He held the arrest warrant signed by the court and went to arrest the important families of the imperial capital's military who had colluded with each other and attempted to launch a coup. He sat in the bulletproof car. His expression was gloomy and cold. His sparkling almond-shaped eyes were slightly narrowed, and the pink at the corners of his eyes was like a smear of blood that had just dried up. It added a hint of killing intent to this cheerful Christmas night. He Zhichu raised his white-gloved hand and said calmly, "Do it." This was the second update of the day, Chapter 2077, Embarrassing at this time and this night. There were 2 updates today. P.S. It's a new month, the last month of 2018. Hurry up and vote for the minimum monthly ticket. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.